It all starts with the weather forecast, for the day that predicts rain all over Korea due to a typhoon. For people who like to camp like our main character, this could be bad news though. He has already packed his bag and gone camping in the forest. He took a few pieces of kimchi marinated meat from his pantry, and put them in a large pan, cooking a lot more food than a normal person could handle. Then he poured himself a cold beer and enjoyed its flavor, thinking that it doesn't matter if it rains or thunders, because the place where he is a little unique. Suddenly some of his friends get there and our main character is glad he cooked a lot of food beforehand. A veteran soldier happily approaches him asking if he still has any of his good booze. Then along comes a quiet beastman and his wild daughter, who go nuts at the sight of the food. There's also a guy who looks like an old wizard and a cute elf with a blue bird on her arm. They all surround our main character in his camp located in an open space between the great mountains and the lush forests. And if any of you haven't caught it yet, our protagonist isn't camping on Earth. Well, this is just a preview of the future. And the real story begins several months earlier. In a small town in Korea, a car pulls up in front of an old building. A man asks his friend if this is the store his grandfather used to run and comments that it has a good atmosphere. The man asks his friend, who wears a mask, if he is really going to open a restaurant in this place, being the most famous chef in Korea. The guy in the mask gets out of the car and asks his friend to check the area carefully because he is afraid that the paparazzi will find him. His friend tells him that no one will follow him that far into the field and takes off his mask in agreement. Well, you might think the guy in the mask lives in the fantasy world and has celebrity syndrome, but he's actually a celebrity. It's Kang Ja-yoon, a renowned celebrity chef who graduated from the CIA. One of the top 3 cooking schools in the world is the Culinary Institute of America, and not the CIA you were thinking of. After that he won the Paris International Cooking Contest, and that was the beginning of his fame. Not only was he skilled, but also handsome, so several TV shows began asking him to appear on their shows. That would have been good if Kan Hae hadn't burned himself. That was only the first problem. The second problem was the invasive fans, who did not value his privacy or work ethic and entered his kitchen to take selfies with him. He became Gordon Nancy in that moment and insulted those fans outside the kitchen. However, he was still reprimanded by his superiors and other chefs in the kitchen, who accused him of making things difficult for them. He was told that if he wanted to mingle with his fans everywhere, he should have joined a gang of hooded boys. He didn't stop there, and there was an army of trolls in line. After Kan Ha-yoon, they said that he was popular only for his face and that his cooking skills were not so good. Some even called him a horrible person for yelling at his fans and said his food was average, at best. Kan Ha-yoon became depressed reading all this and is now tired of the attention. That's why he came to the store his grandfather used to run in his village. His friend asks him to reconsider his decision to open a restaurant here, because he won't make much. Kan Hae responds that for him it is good because he came here to rest. His friend mocks him, saying that people who want to rest don't start businesses. But Kan Ha responds that cooking is like resting for him after carrying all his bags inside. Kanja and Un's friends say that he is hungry, so they should go eat something. They decide to go to the nearest restaurant and the quality of the food. He pulls out the Gordon Rams again, and in it he takes the noodle dough soaked in a mud-like sauce and is ready to fight the chef. But his friend calms him down, because it's normal for the quality of food to drop in a place like this, without competition. He eats the noodles and says that the sauce at least tastes good according to him. That hits Kanja, and just where it hurts him the most, because he can no longer taste the food. He was devastated the first time he found out and went to the doctor. Immediately, the doctor told him that he had lost his sense of taste due to psychological stress, so they could not treat him with conventional medicine or surgery. The doctor told Kan Ja-yoon that he should first take care of his stress and suggested that he look for a hobby back to the present. Kan Ja-yoon's friend asks him if he is really sure to come to this place, although he gets some clients here. there is literally nothing exciting that you can do in a town like this. Kan Hyun replies that there are mountains and fields here, which is perfect for him because he can go camping there. A few days later, Kan Hyun takes all the items he needs for camping and heads to the mountains in a taxi. The taxi driver makes fun of her outfit and says it looks like she's going to the beach instead of the mountain. Suddenly, Kan Hyun remembers something and asks the driver to stop. In the town of Jampion. It was the village where his grandfather lived, and it is the first time Kan Hyun has come there. After the death of his grandfather, he decides to clean his old house before going to the mountains, but then realizes that the warehouse door is open. He panics. Thinking there might be a burglar in there and nervously checks it. He thinks he has a stainless steel camping bag, so he can deal with any burglar, but that's pure boasting. The strength to fight comes from a person's heart, not from the weapons he has. Well, Kan has there suddenly freaks out when something shoots out of the room, which turns out to be just an ordinary cat. See? I told you that he didn't have the heart of a good fighter. He wants to show the attitude to the cat by flexing his bag towards her. Then he goes into the warehouse and starts looking for the light switch. However, as he keeps walking without finding anything, he realizes that something is strange. The warehouse feels much bigger than it looks from the outside. Suddenly, Kan Hyun notices small sparks of light around him, and then realizes that he is seeing a completely different universe while standing on the crumbling edge of a platform. Suddenly, the stone beneath his feet loosens and Kan Hyun stumbles into a different universe, screaming so loud it takes up like an entire page of the manhwa. When he opens his eyes, he finds himself in a strange forest and wonders where a small animal is. She licks his hand and he gets scared, immediately. However, the giant-eared squirrel that was licking his hand is still there, looking at him in surprise. Kanja and Un think that the squirrel has too many huge ears, but then it starts waving the ears and flies away, leaving him perplexed. That's not a squirrel, that's a Pokemon. Then Kanja and Un notices something moving in the bushes behind him and gets scared again, only to find a rabbit there. Well, it wasn't just any rabbit, but the Gigachad rabbit who's never missed the gym in his whole life. I don't think even the lions in this forest try to hunt him. The rabbit jumps as if he's exercising, and Kan Hyun realizes he needs to escape before he runs into even more dangerous creatures. He runs frantically, but night comes and he still can't find a way out. No cell reception there either. Kanja and Un thinks of the doctor who advised him to go camping and curses him because he is now lost. Suddenly his stomach starts growling, asking for food, so Kanja and Un light a fire and then start cooking. The problem is that it has lost its stainless steel bag that held most of the ingredients. All he has now is some dried fish, salt, pepper, and a little broth. Well, at least he has something to eat, so start cooking. Pour the meat broth over the dried fish in your pan and adjust the flavor with salt and pepper. He's not happy with his cooking, but at least it's edible. Ganja and Un eats the dried fish dish and predictably, he can't taste it at all. He is frustrated and throws the pan away before cursing his fate. Suddenly he feels another rustle in the bushes and notices a pair of eyes staring at him. In the darkness, Kanja and Un fear it is a wolf and reach for his pocket knife. Not that he can do much with the knife, but he still takes it and positions it toward the big black wolf, baring his fangs at it. Kanja Hyun screams loudly, anticipating an attack, but nothing happens, and when he opens his eyes, he finds nothing there. Then, all of a sudden, he hears a sound coming from behind him, and turns around to find a small white puppy devouring the food. In his pan, the little puppy wagged the clean pan, and wagged his tail intensely while looking at Kan Hyun. Kan Hyun is completely confused when he sees the creature and at first thinks it is a small breed of dog. The puppy approaches him and he wonders where he came from. Kan Hyun tells him that if he has finished eating he should leave because he doesn't even like dogs. He then takes the puppy and starts messing up his hair while complaining that he doesn't understand people who find dogs cute. This is the kind of dishonesty I can forgive. Kan Hyun notices that the puppy's fur is a little stiff because it is wild. Also, upon closer inspection of his appearance, he notices his sharp claws and fangs. What makes him realize that he is not a dog, but a wolf? He panics, wondering where the wolf's mother is. He feared that the big black wolf he saw before could be the mother, and when he finds his cub with a human, the obvious could happen. Kanja and Un are terrified. But then he realizes that he is still too hungry. He lies down on the ground thinking that it doesn't matter if the wolf kills him, because he's destined to starve anyway. Suddenly, the wolf starts dragging him using his shirt, and Kan Hyun asks if he is now trying to eat him. However, the wolf leads him to a hollow tree trunk emitting a faint purple light. When Kanja and Un don't notice, he sees the same thing he saw before he came to this world. He realizes it is the hole he shut up through, and wonders if he can go home using it. However, he doubts why the hole goes down again, and if he takes it, he could end up in hell. He just wants to take a look first, so he sticks his head through the hole, but the puppy sees it as an opportunity. He happily approaches Kanja Hyun and hits his butt with his head, throwing him into the hole. Once again, Kanja Hyun screams loudly while cursing the puppy in his mind, but to his relief, he soon finds himself outside the warehouse again. He is moved to tears by the fact that he survived. Kanja and Un thinks he couldn't even thank the puppy for his help and decides to never forget his debt as long as he lives. Well, the puppy's right there. He starts wagging his tail as Kanja and Un notices it. Kanja and Un has no choice but to take him home. He gives the puppy a bath first, and he becomes a fidgety spinner, spraying water everywhere. After that, he decides to name the puppy and chooses a list of names like white rice, white sugar, etc. I think calling it vanilla ice cream would be much better than these lame names. After that, Kan Hyun sleeps peacefully with the blue wolf. The next day, while stretching after waking up, Kan Hyun realizes that he hasn't slept this well in a long time. After that, she brings some dog food for her puppy, which she has named white rice. However, the puppy refuses to eat it. Kanja Hyun brings cat food and even rabbit food for him, but white rice doesn't want it. Kanja and Un is irritated now and decides to ignore the puppy and eat something. It cooks a lot of breakfast for someone who can't taste food, hoping that maybe there's at least something they can taste though. Before he can start eating white rice, he jumps on the table and begins to devour the food that Kan Hyun made. He tries to push him away, but then he notices something peculiar. White rice is only eating the things that Kan Hyun made himself and ignores all factory processed foods. He doesn't even eat the frozen steak that Kan Hyun brought from a convenience store. This gives our main character an idea and realizes that his pet wolf could be a gourmet. So he prepares a test for her. It presents the two steak dishes that he cooked over white rice. He used the same quality of meat and the same cooking method for both dishes. But the sauce is different. One, he has a commercial sauce, while the other is his original sauce, which received many praises in the Cannes International Cooking Competition. Hyun told him white rice, if you really know gourmet food, you should choose wisely first. White rice smells steak with commercial sauce and Kan Hai. Un knows it's tasty too. However, if the puppy chooses his sauce, he will be an Epicurean, a person who has developed a taste for luxury. White rice first eats the steak with commercial sauce, then switches to Kan Hyun's original steak with sauce, and while eating it, Kan Hyun immediately realizes that he liked it much better because of the faster movement of his tail. He is thrilled that white rice actually turned out to be a gourmet and realizes he can't feed him just any Kanja thing. Now taking a detailed look at it, clean plate, and realizes that after a long time he felt it was worth all his effort to cook. Shortly after that, Kanja and you begin painting your restaurant, but the paint is applied unevenly, making you question the issue at hand. Does anyone tell you that you're using interior paint to paint the exterior walls? Kan Hyun, he turns around and sees an older man, elegant and extravagant, complaining about how the kids of the new generation can't even recognize the painting. Kanja, and one is surprised to see the tough old man and takes off his cap to ask him who the man is. He also takes off his glasses and reveals that he is the chief of this town. He was hoping the new townsman would come and see him. But like Kanja and that didn't come to see him, he came right here. The village chief then insults his painting skills. Kanja and saying that it looks like a raccoon painted the wall with a monkey's tail. He notices white rice, tries to pet him while he tells Kanja and Un to quit to paint because it will introduce you to someone who can do it perfectly. Kanja and try refuse and says he will call professionals, but the village chief says he doesn't know the value of money. He tells him to be free on the weekend because then he will bring a local to help him. Meanwhile, White Rice has been skillfully dodging the old man's advances. The weekend comes and the village chief brings a man named John Minju who will help him paint the shop. They both begin to examine the wall. And Khan there is still wondering, why are they working so hard? For the sake of a stranger, the old man then asks if this place is going to be a restaurant. And Kan Hyun, he explains, planning to turn it into an Italian restaurant. The old man is unaware of its Italian origins, so Kan Hyun just claims it's going to be a Western restaurant. Minyo, alert upon hearing this, anxiously inquires if pork chops will be served in this Western restaurant. Later, he clarifies that his wife loves pork chops and their usual restaurant has shut down. With his wife pregnant, they can't travel far. Mindo attempted to cook pork chops himself, but they seemed unsafe for the baby. He tells Kan, Hyun was just asking out of curiosity, so you don't have to feel pressured, Kan. You don't think that the pork chops, they're easy to make even if they're not on the menu. Kan Hyun, I was in a bind. How could I offer food to customers that I had never even tasted myself? Just as he was on the brink of surrender, he noticed the exuberant white rice trailing behind him. Suddenly Kan Hyun had a revelation about knowing the taste of food arose and told Minju that I could make him some breaded pork steaks. Later, Kan Hyun started making the steaks based on the description Minju had given him. According to Minju, the sauce was more brown than red and sweet because of the tomatoes. Kanja and Un gave each other. He realizes that the sweetness in the tomatoes was equal to tomato ketchup. He soon prepared all the ingredients and told Wheat Rice to prepare himself as his taste tester. Kanja and I introduced the first batch of pork steaks to Wheat Rice felt that his tail did not move fast enough, so the plate was not up to par. This fact hurt him, so Kanja and I, he prepared several iterations of the pork tenderloin. He meticulously observed his flavor measuring device, which was undoubtedly White Rice's tail. Upon discovering the optimal variant, White Rice was thoroughly satisfied as well. Kanja and Un felt that now that I had a taste meter, I could finally enjoy cooking again. The next day, Minju arrived with his wife. She was excited to eat at a new restaurant and said it had been a long time since she had pork chops. Kanja and soon I introduce you to your special pork steaks, and Minju's wife was already amazed at how wonderful they looked and smelled in one bite, and both Minju and Kanja, and they still waited anxiously for his answer. She said the pork steak at the country restaurant was good, but this one was much better. He was really happy and exclaimed that the sauce tasted similar, but the meat was much crispier and juicier. Then he started talking to Minjust about his first date. That day they had also eaten pork steaks and she remembered how Minjun looked at her all the time instead of eating. The burly man blushed when he heard that, and his wife said he had enjoyed pork steaks after that day. Before that, he didn't even like them that much. She said that instead of pork steak she appreciated the sweet memories with him. Kanja and Un was happy to see his customers so satisfied and turned around to see that he had given him too much food. He gave White Rice a compliment for his good work, and White Rice responded with another good old bark.
Late Kanja and
He began to rethink his ideas for the restaurant. Instead of opening an Italian restaurant, he decided to create a menu with Western dishes based on what his customers wanted. Restaurants with flexible menus like that already existed, but they were all expensive, high-class restaurants.
Kanja Yun.
He felt like he might need to improvise things while he ran his restaurant, but before that he had to do something about White Rice. He seemed to be
Depressed. Kanja Yun Lei seemed forlorn.
He asked if he missed the forest he came from, and White Rice's ears and tail perked up at the word forests.
Kanja and say.
He realized that returning an animal to the world it came from would be the best thing, even if it made him feel a little lonely. However, remembering the Pokemon squirrel and the rabbit,
Gahiga Kanja and
he began to tremble with fear and thought that he did not want to go there. He planned to cancel his visit, but Witter Rice began to look at him with innocent puppy eyes. Kanja.
And one told him he wasn't going to fall for it?
But apparently he loved it from innocent puppy eyes. It will be irresistible, and ended up back in the otherworldly forest. He was worried about himself and just hoped everything would be okay. He walked with White Rice in the woods, wondering if this was a separate dimension, like in the comics he reads. Suddenly he heard the sound of water and came closer to see what he saw there. He blew his head off. There was a lake in front of him.
And it was so beautiful.
Kashkan Hayun. He was speechless. He stated that if this place were his home, he would also feel nostalgic no matter where he went. Then he looked at White Rice and told her there was a parting present for him.
Kan has pulled out a grill,
portable, from his backpack and told the wolf cub that he would give him some expensive meat. White Rice was already surprised by that.
And then Kan Hayum.
She melted some butter, let the premium cut of meat sizzle over it, and then sprinkled salt and pepper on top. White Rice really liked the finished product, and his tail moved so fast that
Kan Hayum believed that
it would become a helicopter at that rate. Then he looked at the lake and realized that something was missing, and that something was a can of cold beer that was necessary to enjoy such a good view.
Kanja,
and a drink of beer. And then he was about to give the cliched reaction everyone gets after drinking beer. But for a change, he didn't, since he couldn't even taste it. Well, it's not like anyone drinks alcohol for the taste anyway.
Kanja and
enjoying the scenery. When he suddenly felt a leaf on his shoulder, a harsh voice asked him who he was. Because he doesn't look like a person from the nearby towns.
Kanja and Un are
terrified, and the veteran guard, who has him at sword point, asks him to identify himself.
Kanja and Un are
scared and answers the man's question. He can only tell him that he is a chef. He insists that he is not a suspicious person at all, but the man asks him, "What the hell does a chef do?"
This is truly Kanja and you.
He replies that he was simply admiring the view, and the man asks if a forest where demonic beasts appear is a place to admire the view.
He shouts at Kanja and one who
say you're really up to it, otherwise, he'll kill you. Suddenly the man notices White Rice eating his food and looking at him out of the corner of his eye, and gives himself up.
Kanja mentions something interesting.
And Un is terrified of the man and begs him to spare his life, even offering all his money. In return, he realizes that Earth's currency will be of no use here, so he will try to change it somehow. However, the man silently takes away his sword and apologizes.
With Kanja and
being too reactive, since this forest is a place where ordinary people cannot enter, he puts his sword away before introducing himself as Randolph, a knight from the territory below.
Kanja and
does he introduce and wonder why the man suddenly changed his attitude? Randolph tells him that he is accompanied by a white wolf that only appears in folk tales, and that is enough to prove that he is not
a malicious individual named Kanja.
And Un is confused by that, so Randolph decides to educate him. In this regard, he explains that white wolves are a race that has inherited the blood of the wolf god. The primordial wolf god is supposed to possess eyes that distinguish between good and evil, along with his great wisdom. The white wolves descended from him have inherited some of his abilities, specifically Randolph.
He tells Kanjayam
that since a white wolf is accompanying him, he must be a good person. After hearing that White Rice is a descendant of a god, everything makes sense to Kan Hayum, from his great hunger to his speed, both because he is a semi-divine being. Randall then comments that the food anyone has in a beautiful place like this is destined to be special.
Her gaze rests on him. Premium steak then Kan Jae-yoon.
She has cooked and asks him more about it.
Kan Jae-yoon.
He reveals it's beef and asks the gentleman if Randolph says he already ate, but then says psychology because he hasn't eaten anything yet. Also, the meat smells so good that he couldn't resist it even if his stomach was full. He eagerly asks for a
bocado and Kan Jae-yoon. Give him a piece?
Randolph is impressed by the taste, another world of meat, tender and juicy. Then he notices the beer can in his hand.
Kan Jae-yoon and asks,
what is it? He is surprised to hear what alcohol is and asks if it is from the area. He is curious about it.
And Kan
Hayun asks him if he wants some out of courtesy. Randolph elaborates that his question was born out of pure curiosity, hence he really doesn't need the answer as he holds the can firmly.
He tells Kanja and Un that he can't.
Given the insistence, Kanja and Un decide to hand him a fresh can rather than the one previously used. As Randolph takes a sip, he's astonished by the unparalleled clarity and refreshment of the beer, something he has never experienced before.
And Asi,
she's glad the gentleman's demeanor has changed from that of a menacing guard to that of a curious tourist. Randolph thanks her for the gesture and tells her he can't leave without returning the favor. He tells him that if he ever comes to town, he can ask anyone for the address of the captain of the order, Randolph, and they will tell him the
way was clear and Kanja yearned for more adventures.
Un doesn't know exactly how high the rank of captain of the order is in the army, so he's quite confused. However, Randolph thinks that since he is not reacting despite knowing his position, he must really be an extraordinary person. With that, the captain of the order
he says to Kan Hayun
that since he has the blue-white wolf he will be fine, no matter what happens. He returns to his patrol.
Telling Kan Hayun,
may they once again cross paths, Kan, in the future.
Hayun said,
it's rather unexpected to discover that Randolph consumed alcohol while on duty, and he worries about the acceptable norms in this world. I mean, it's really quite an odd and silly concern when you have this adorable demigod wolf right beside you demanding something to eat. He gives all the remaining food to White Rice and thinks about how lively her life has been for him. He feels a little sad about leaving it here, but he thinks it's for the best. He gets up with a sigh telling White Rice that he doesn't know if they will see each other again and asking her to take care of himself, walks away and then looks back at White Rice. Dissatisfied that he is not showing any sign of affection.
Kan Hayun,
I was hoping the puppy would at least be a little attached to it, but when he looks a second time he only finds his tray of
food asked from the powerful Kan Hayun.
He asks where Witter must have gone, he says, but then he feels his backpack is heavy because the puppy is clinging to it.
Kan Hayun tells him,
let her go and Witter, he says, uses his claws to grab the bag, ruining it in the process.
Kanja and Anes,
defeated after a while and asks the puppy why he's doing this? And White says, only the human month asks the wolf cub why he wants to get back with him. When he returns to his hometown, White Rice barks at him and
Kanja and Dali.
She asks if she would rather be with him. She is happy and picks up the dog thinking she has no choice but to take him back. However, upon returning to town,
it's a swing.
He realizes that he must go to the other world quite often, or White Rice will cause a scandal in the village. He sees everyone gathered for a party and wonders what's going on. He doesn't really care, but they're all gathered in front of his shop. Suddenly, the village chief,
Kan Hayun, comments,
at last Kan has arrived here.
Swing it.
He asks what all the people here are doing and he replies that they are having a banquet and asks if he didn't find out.
Kanja and
he says no and decides to leave because he doesn't want to join the party anyway. However, the village chief stops him and tells him that he should join them because this party was organized to welcome him. Anyway, the townspeople unfurled a huge banner welcoming him to their town and he wasn't ready to see that.
Everyone's having fun at the welcome party, from Kan Hayun,
except for Kan Hayun, who wants to go home while the village elders bother him. Minju and his wife seem to be the only sensible people there.
And Kan
Hayun asks them if they always celebrate like this when there is a new person in town. She tells him that they are a small town, so they try to be close on the first of the
another, but Kan Hayun
You can clearly see that old people just need an excuse to drink all day.
The village chief approaches Kan Hayun
To tell him that they really care about each other and that is why sharing their happiness is a common practice. The old man asks him to promote his restaurant.
Here in Kan Hayun, she almost believes him until she notices it. Using bottle caps as props, the old man runs to drink with his friends, but Kan still thinks that.
Is it really a good idea to promote your restaurant? Everyone's busy enjoying themselves.
And Kan Hayun thinks
that these kinds of meetings aren't so bad. After all, he realizes that white rice is missing and realizes that some villagers have surrounded him. They are loving how cute it is and how fast it eats all the meat. However, when they try to pet him, white rice dodges his touch like a pro. After swiftly defeating everyone with his agility, white rice speeds through the meeting, stealing all the expensive meat at such a pace that most are unaware of his actions.
Kanja
and Un pretends not to know white rice and his emotional memories fade as he thinks he should have left the wolf cub in the woods. Suddenly he notices a child sitting alone in the corner. His grandmother soon comes with some food for him, but he hits her in anger.
Kanja and Un are not here,
happy to see this, but the San boy escapes. As his grandmother tries to talk to him, the village chief approaches the old woman to ask her what happened and she replies that it is Sam who has been acting rebellious since he came back from school. Yesterday his friend bragged about eating a hamburger, so now he wants it too. Grandma brought him a convenience store burger, but the kid doesn't seem to want it. Someone volunteers to buy a burger from a restaurant the next day, but then someone else counters by suggesting that the child probably wants a Big Mac, which isn't available there. Nonetheless, the village chief asserts that it's okay if they don't have it on the menu because they can make it themselves, pointing towards Kan Hayun, introduced as a chef from Seoul with extensive knowledge.
Kan is still here,
exasperated by the attention and surrenders and accepts the request of the village chief. However, the village chief tells him that he doesn't need to taste the same as a Big Mac because Sam probably doesn't even want a burger. The boy must be jealous of his friend, who went out with his parents. The boss explains that the blood mom is admitted to a hospital while her dad is out of the country for work, so she lives with her grandmother. Here the chief says that since Blood is the only child in his village, they must take care of him.
Kan Hayun,
he develops a newfound admiration for the village chief, who seems thoroughly aware of everyone's condition. However, his admiration takes a nosedive later that night when he notices several empty bottles tied around his waist. Kan
Hayun,
he thinks he can easily make burgers because I study in America, but he never really tried a Big Mac because he didn't do anything but study. However, he feels he must do at least that for the villagers, because his pet will lose all his flesh. White Rice is nervous to hear that and tries to act cute to win over
Kan Hayun,
but he tells her to shut up because there won't be any more food for him. White Rice is upset.
But then Kan Hayun,
he tells him he will have to try something for him. He creates a burger for White Rice just by looking at a picture, but the flavor meter isn't moving fast enough.
Kan Hayun suddenly remember what America was like with a love of cooking?
He never put so much passion into anything more than cooking. He wonders,
what would the Kan Hayun think?
From the past, if he saw it that way, he is not happy that he is trying to create just a poor replica to satisfy a child, and he is not pleased that the village chief told him that he does not need to taste the same. He ties up his apron and puts on his hat, saying he has never half-cooked before and won't now the next day.
Meanwhile Kanja
Yoon's busy working his magic in the kitchen. Zanjo is waiting in his restaurant. His grandmother is there with him along with Mino and his wife. They try to excite the child by saying that
Kanja and
he can cook just about anything, but he doesn't derive any joy from it, sadly.
Suddenly Kanja
one comes with a hamburger and everyone is amazed at how good it looks, saying who takes a bite and feels the taste of freedom in their mouth with excitement.
Kanja and Asi.
He goes back to his grandmother to tell her how delicious that burger is, and the old woman smiles at seeing her grandson finally happy. However, Zanjo suddenly becomes sad when guilt overwhelms him. He admits that he just wanted to see his mom. He reveals that he demanded a good burger because he thought his grandmother would take him to Zul for a burger and there he could meet his mom. He begins to cry while apologizing to his grandmother for being rude. And she gently holds his face. She hugs him, apologizing for not realizing how much he was suffering. Only Zanjo cries as he says it's okay to live with her, and they both apologize to each other. Suddenly Kan Jae-yoon, he says, who is planning a trip to Seoul, and asks the boy if he'd like to accompany him, leaving everyone in astonishment. And Kan Jae-yoon tells Zanju that they can pass by the place they want to visit and eat a hamburger together. The child lights up when he hears that, and his grandmother thanks him, a con swing, and it is only after a moment that he comes to understand he was slightly overexcited. Nonetheless, witnessing Zanjoy's beaming face, her grandmother believes it wouldn't be too much trouble. Following this, Kan Hyun glances at his refrigerator and contemplates if he should take some project work and embark on a camping trip. White Rice's ears twitch at the mention of camping, and he draws nearer. A Kan swing. Whoever assumes they won't find time to camp once the restaurant is operational prompts White to laugh, and he gazes back with those naive puppy eyes again, despite all attempts. Kan Hyun sees himself forced to take his puppy to the otherworldly forest. He sits in a grim chair while White Rice just barks and runs around. Well, there's no point in being upset about that. Does Kan Hyun? He opts to camp right there because the scenery is alluring. He begins assembling a tent. But that's harder than putting furniture together at IKEA without an instruction manual. Meanwhile, Widow Rice is chasing butterflies soon. Kan Hyun managed to arm his tent and subsequently realizes his hunger. He starts preparing a spicy kimchi stew, but his taste buds remain unfulfilled. Two adorable Pokemon squirrels approach him eagerly, and Kan Hyun decides to offer them some lightly cooked meat. As he tosses some pieces at them, a giant bird unexpectedly seizes them and flies away. Regardless, Kankai has enough to ensure the squirrels are content. He too finds great satisfaction in simply being surrounded by nature, doing nothing, and he reflects on the healing essence of nature. He then wonders about Widow Rice's whereabouts, confident he will return by dinner time. However, what he doesn't know is that there is something hidden among the bushes, and he is drooling over the food Kan is eating. There's no note, the creaking of the leaves, and thinks Wit Terry has returned. However, something else rushes towards the bowl of food in his Kan hand. Not yet. He has reflexes at the level of a Formula 1 driver, and moves the bowl away from the attacker instantly. He is now on guard and discovers that the attacker is a fierce young beast girl. Kan Hyun note the girl's cat ears and tail and gets confused. He wonders if she is one of those beastly beings they show in fantasy and sekai shows. Well, that shouldn't be the main cause of your concern, because cat girl is fierce. Grunts while jump towards Kan Hyun. But his actions last time were no accident, and he can dodge his attack once again. However, the determined girl doesn't show any signs of surrender, and Kanja and say, question, where is Guita Rice when you really need it? He tries to work things out peacefully with the cat girl and realizes she might be hungry. He shows her the bowl of food, and suddenly, she calms down. Kanja and Un leaves the bowl on the floor and tells the cat girl that he will give her this and then she should return peacefully. The girl doesn't believe him, and he approaches the food quite cautiously. However, the look and smell of it attracts her and she starts drooling. He takes a bite directly into his mouth, and suddenly, an explosion of chili sweeps his taste buds. She falls to the ground and starts screaming. Kanja and she realizes that the kimchi stew might be too spicy for her and decides to offer her some water, though. The cat girl calms down on her own, and as the spiciness of the chili wears off, the deliciousness of the meat and vegetables begin to flow. She gets up and starts eating the stew again, and Kan, there's on, he realizes that it must adapt to his taste. Suddenly, Widow Rice returns in time for his meal, and Kan, there's an SE complaint that he could have returned a little earlier. It's going to reheat the stew for him. But White Rice notices the cat girl eating the food intended for him. White Rice does not tolerate it and he immediately attacks La. Kan Jae-yoon with the girl. He insists on stopping and not angering the girl, but the wolf cub is furious. He continues to fight. Girl cat and Kan Jae-yoon, please try to stop them. It appears white rice had the upper hand and the cat girl starts to cry as her nose gets crushed. She tries to throw herself at him and Kan Jae-hyun try to get white rice away from her. Then suddenly the situation becomes peaceful in an instant, when a cool and composed cat man arrives on the scene and grabs the cat girl in mid-flight. The cat man apologizes to the human before walking away from the camp at great speed.
Kanja and a solo.
Can you look at it and walk away with white rice's paw print on your face and wonder, how many different races live in this forest? Well, he goes back to town after that and starts cleaning up his restaurant with the help of white rice. The opening day of the restaurant is tomorrow.
And Kan?
Hyum thinks he needs to stop playing games and get serious about business. Meanwhile, an elderly woman passes in front of the store and notices the welcome sign. Kan Hyum remains inside. He reviews his preparations and finds that everything has been taken care of as soon as he completes the cleaning. He's dreaming of a flawless opening. When suddenly the old woman enters his shop, she asks him if they are open, and Kan Jae-in replies that they will open tomorrow, however, so as not to disappoint the villagers.
Kan Jae-in.
He sighs and asks her to sit down. The woman notices that the furniture is old and asks her why she is using old things instead of throwing them away. He comments that this place is still the same.
And Kan Hyun Lee.
He asks if he came to visit when it was a tea house run by his grandfather. The woman does not give him an answer and instead asks what she will sell here. He tells her that he will sell Western food like pizza and pasta. The old lady only knows pasta as American noodles, and I can tell that many Italians will be upset by her comment. She asks him
to Kan Hyun that die
a little money and tells him to decide the details himself. He heads to the kitchen and thinks this is the old woman's first time eating pasta, so he decides to make the basic tomato sauce for her. She cooks everything perfectly because she feels like she's the first customer. In his shop, he presents the tomato paste to the woman. Soon Ganja there is anxious for her response, because although he was not able to taste the pasta, he has received many compliments for it. Before, the old woman takes a bite, and her expressions darken as she asks Kan Jae-yoon how much is baffling him. Meanwhile, the village chief enters the store
to see Kan Jae-yoon,
and he is surprised to see the old woman, whom he calls Grandma Park. He asks her why she is here and she says she came to eat since it is a restaurant. The village chief tells her that the opening is tomorrow, but the old woman says she will leave now that she has finished eating. The elderly gentleman grumbled about the woman's cold demeanor before noticing the plate of tomato paste, which confirmed he had truly eaten there, leaving him puzzled as to why so much was left.
Kanja food and contemplating it further
himself and feels his entire existence is being torn to pieces as he wonders why the old lady didn't like his food.
Kantyuk.
He falls into a depression due to the fact that the old woman left almost the entire plate untouched. The village chief tries to console him, and he starts by asking Kan-yuk what's wrong. He asks if the preparations for the restaurant are not going well. Kan-yuk replied coldly that there is no problem, even if the preparations are not going well, because he is going to close his restaurant from today. Friend has not even opened yet. That's exactly what the village chief is thinking. He soon comprehends that the reason behind Kan-yuk's subdued mood is because Grandma Park had left a substantial amount of food behind, causing him to chuckle as he informed him,
Kan-yuk?
It's not like I have a chef, master or any other culinary competence that I can satisfy everyone. This isn't even more infuriating because he actually won an international cooking contest. The village chief tells him to just ignore it, because Granny Park probably didn't even come here for food. He tells the boy that someone closely associated with the old lady used to come here often, so she might just be here out of nostalgia. Who is curious to know who that person is, and the village chief says he is talking about the old woman's husband. He was a regular customer of this place when it was a tea shop, but he passed away last year. After that, the Grandma Park spent almost all her time alone, and even the villagers rarely see her. The village chief believes that the old woman still thinks a lot about her husband, but the dead will not come back to life no matter how much you cry for them. He says the living must move on with their lives because clinging to the past is foolish. He then gets back to the subject and tells Kank-juk that it's not his fault because Grandma Park is picky enough when it comes to food given her special situation. He might have reacted worse than usual, so Kank-juk need not worry. That's why he responds, how can he not worry after hearing her story? The thoughts give him a headache, so he goes camping in the other world. In front of him, Higachad Rabbit is doing push-ups and White Rice is sitting on top of him. Kank-juk thinks that because of them, no monster will dare approach him, and that will give you plenty of time to organize your thoughts. He stretches thinking about how surprised he was when the old woman left without eating his food, but feels bad for her after hearing her full story. However, he is still surprised that she left the plate he trusted most and wonders if he should make some Korean food for her next time. Suddenly Kank-juk notices something above her head and it's the same feral cat girl from before. She gets nervous when she sees that he has noticed, but Kank-juk doesn't feel like dealing with her. At this moment the girl starts screaming for God knows what reason and Kank-juk just looks at her bored. He thinks the girl is hungry just like last time and starts looking for something in her bag when White Rice approaches Kank-juk. The cat girl comes down from the tree. Also Kank-juk, he cooks a juicy steak and then he's ready to put hot sauce on it, but then he remembers the last time. The cat girl couldn't handle the spicy well and she cringes when she sees the hot sauce bottle. Kank-juk decide to skip it, melt butter in another pan and then make some mushrooms with a little pepper and salt. Add a little cream to thicken and then add a little cheese before adding the cooked pasta to the mixture. As a finishing touch, you place the steak on top of the pasta and your steak pasta with cream is ready. He gives a plate to the cat girl who growls at him. Kank-juk tells him he can growl at him later and right now he needs to eat it fast before it gets stolen. She's a little anxious about the taste of chili from last time. But he decides to take a bite. Anyway, with just the first bite, she feels in a different dimension, with angelic cats preparing the meat and cream for her. She meows with pleasure as she eats the pasta and quickly devours everything. She looks at Kanjob with eager eyes, as if telling him that she liked what he cooked. Without chile, he can say that she wants more, although the girl seems unable to use words. He is pleased that she is more satisfied than she was when she ate the spicy stew. Kank-juk is not a big fan of creamed steak pasta though because it is very greasy and heavy, which doesn't work for thee. Also, it's more of a sloppy fusion than real pasta. It works for me, so you can give it to me if you're not going to eat it. The cat girl also thinks the same and starts rubbing against Kank-juk's leg to act Linda to give him more food. He ruffles her hair and thinks it doesn't matter if the pasta is real or not, as long as it suits her. He suddenly has a moment of revelation and immediately returns home. Wash some chives in the sink and call White Rice to help you find the best good batch. White Rice means that it is a dog and not a donkey that will eat grass and move away from the dishes. Kank-juk is disappointed, but he thinks it won't be very difficult, even if he has to do it without the help of White Rice because the taste of all the ingredients is etched in his mind. Kank-juk suddenly finds himself in his restaurant ready to start his new culinary adventure, however. Seeing the notice on the door that says the restaurant will open next week for personal reasons, his mind begins to wander outside the store. The village chief catches what is going through Kank-juk's head when he reads the notice. Later he visits Grandma Park's house with a cheerful attitude and suggests that she go out more often, as there are many fun things outside of her house. She asks him abruptly why she brought him there all of a sudden. and he simply says that he wanted to stop by to see a neighbor. The village chief laughs, mentioning how surprised the young chef was when Grandma Park left her noodles intact. She just says she didn't like the dish and there's nothing surprising about it. The village chief agrees with her and then suggests that since she doesn't have much to do, she should visit him again. Grandma Park asks him why he should bother doing it. Since the opportunity she gave him was enough, he tries to convince her that things could be different this time and then tries to flatter the old woman by saying that she is not far from her house. He asks her to give Count Juke another chance because it might be worth the effort and then walks away. Back at Count's restaurant, Juke has finished his new pasta recipe and seems satisfied. He has added some fresh vegetables and seafood to create a harmonious and local flavor. But the main problem now is how you can invite Grandma Park here again. Suddenly the doorbell rings and Count Juke comes out to see who it is this time. To his surprise, it's Grandma Park again, and she, once again, asks him if it's open. Mrs. Lukey looks like a good robot. Count Juke is happy to have her there and says they're open. Grandma Park sits down to eat and wonders if Count Juke knew he would come back again because he has already prepared food for her. She thinks it'll be American noodles again and Italian again. They're not happy with your comment. Grandma Park doesn't like the taste of Western noodles and thinks it would have been better if she hadn't suddenly come here. He smells tempting and wonders where Kanjo came from. He places the plate of pasta he has prepared for her and thanks her for waiting. He tells the old woman that this is a dish from the special menu of his restaurant, lily pasta. The old woman is confused as she looks at the pasta and wonders if they have lilies in America. He also notices the clams on the plate and decides to try it. He takes some noodles and wonders if they'll taste better than before. Well, when the taste of spring onions hits her, it suddenly takes her down the rabbit hole. Of nostalgia, she remembers the last and most memorable spring she spent with her husband watching the cherry trees in bloom. He said that the flowers had bloomed more this year than in previous years, and then he picked up some and started flirting with Grandma Park, calling Miss Park and asking if she was free that day. He asked her out for coffee playfully and she asked him if he had gone senile or something. The taste of the noodles made her relive those memories vibrant and she looks out the window and sees the petals of the cherry blossoms fall. He thinks it's finally spring again. He then asks Kanjok if this dish wasn't on the menu before and he replies that it wasn't. She asks if he did it for her and then demands to know why he bothered to do this. Count Juke simply responds that he wanted to make food that he liked and then adds that he wanted to try something new and improve. Grandma Park is moved by his words. Count Juke thinks he can't depend on white rice forever, and that's why he wanted to satisfy his first customer without his help. Grandma Park starts eating the pasta and Count Juke can only watch her in admiration as she finishes everything. She then asks him how much he owes her and he nervously tells her he's fine and he doesn't have to give her anything. She sighs, asking what kind of restaurant owner doesn't accept payment from her customers. She insists that since she ate, she must also pay for it, asks Kanjuk not to discount the value of the meal she made for any reason, and then tells him to add this dish to the menu too, because she will return Kanjuk. He is speechless by her gesture, and he is happy to have managed to win her. Later he returns to the other world to enjoy some free time. He has set up a hammock for him there, as well as a comfortable bed for white rice. Can you? Who is happy to have managed to satisfy his first client and successfully open his restaurant. Now he's gonna take some time to recover from the stress. They make up an excuse that white rice kicks if they don't come here regularly anyway, so it's the perfect place to come and relax over the weekend. He's a little too excited for someone who just wants to relax. Suddenly, something huge and gray flies over him. Kanjuk doesn't even understand what just happened, and suddenly Night Captain Randolph arrives. Kanjuk finds him on the ground, his camp ruined and destroyed. The Night Captain is surprised to see him there and then greets him cheerfully, saying it's been a long time. Kanjuk is furious and wonders if Randolph's eyes are just for decoration, because he doesn't seem to realize the situation Kant is in. Juk gets up and random mocks his choice for picking a good spot. Kanjuk asks him if he's patrolling again today. And Randolph says today is his day off, so he just came here to hunt a little white rice. He shows some interest after hearing that word, and Randolph gets excited too. He declares that this time they are going to be invited to a meal and asks them to go hunting with him, while White Rice is eager to do so. Kanjuk is just stunned, he didn't want to go. But here he's holding a bow and a quiver of arrows tied behind his back. He's not happy that his peaceful healing time is over, but the White Rice is busy with Randolph and they're hiding in the bushes waiting for the leaping birds that are found in this area. Kanjuk is curious about the hopping birds, and Randolph tells him to look ahead to see what he's talking about. Hopping birds are just ostriches. But in flamenco colors. Kanjuk thinks his fur looks like cotton candy and feels sorry that Randolph is going to kill those cute creatures. Looks like the Night Captain could guess what he was thinking. He tells Kanjuk that feathers may look cute, but hopping birds are kind of short hair. Kanjuk is confused. And Randolph tells him that that is not the real appearance of hoppers and that the pink part is not their fur. Suddenly two birds fight and they suddenly reveal that they are gigs of the bird empire and that the pink part was actually their highly compressed muscles. Kanjuk is terrified and wonders if Randolph really wants him to catch those dangerous creatures. Well, your opinion doesn't matter, because Randolph and White Rice are already charging towards the birds and asking Kanjuk to support them from behind. Along the way, Randolph taught Kanjuk how to shoot properly, but if he could have learned to shoot accurately in such a short time, he would be an Olympic-level archer and not a chef. He decides to calm down and put an arrow in the bow. Anyway, he struggles to pull the rope. Aim the arrow at the birds and then release it forward. Well, the arrow came pretty close, but not close to the birds. He barely missed hitting White Rice, who gives Kanjuk a stunned look, and also Randolph as he strangles the Giga bird. White Rice feels betrayed by his friend and Kanjuk nervously apologizes to him. Night comes soon and Randolph is cooking the poultry meat over the fire. Randolph, with a smile on his face, asks Kanjuk if he's sure he can eat just because his arm is vibrating like he's tied to an old phone. Nokia can't. Juk responds that he can bear this, and more than himself, he is worried about something else. Jumping bird meat stinks and he thinks it would be too rude to cover his nose while it cooks. It's ready soon and Random gives Kanjuk a piece. White Rice is absent from the scene and his piece is on his plate. Kanjuk reluctantly takes the first bite and discovers that the taste of poultry can really stimulate his dead taste buds because it's so bad. Randolph thinks he's stunned because it's so good, and decides to cook more. Kanjuk that he panics and asks him to let him cook. But then suddenly freezes, wondering if he can really cook something he doesn't know how to taste. However, he decides to discard his worries because just earlier today he proved himself cooking pasta for Grandma. Park throws off his cape and tells Randolph that since he is a chef he will do something using this meat for him. First, remove the blood from the meat in a nearby stream so that the bad smell disappears. However, this process is slow and will take at least half a day to clean a piece of meat that size. Although the meat is not completely clean, this is what you should work with to eliminate the bad smell. Kanjuk pours dark beer over the meat. Randolph sneaks up on him and asks if he's pouring beer into the bucket. demanding an explanation as to how you can waste something so precious. But Count Duke has no time for his complaints. He asks the cavalry captain to build a structure to hang the pot and he silently obeys. Count Duke then comments that it would be nice to have some bay leaves or herbs. Fill the pot with equal amounts of beer and water and then add onions, pepper, salt and sugar. Let the mixture cook for approximately 1 hour. And when it is ready, ask Random to help him take it down. Kanchuk uncovers the pot and the aroma of the cooked meat stew is so delicious that even the white rice has returned. Randall asks if it is ready and Kanchuk replies that they still have to roast it one more time. Normally I would put it in an oven, but since he is camping he will use open fire instead. Once the meat is well roasted, Kanchuk cuts it into smaller pieces to complete the dish. As Randolph holds the plate of the finished dish, he wonders if this wonderful aroma really comes from hopping bird meat. You know that even the best chefs in this territory have given up on making meat taste good. He can't believe Kanjuk has achieved the impossible, but when he takes a bite he feels lightning coursing through his body. He wonders what this taste is and begins to devour the meat. The outside is crunchy, like a cookie, but the inside is juicy and tender. Randolph feels he's in the sky and wonders if this is really the meat of the altar birds he's eaten hundreds of times before. However, he feels that something is missing from this dish to make it balanced and perfect. He has his eureka moment and immediately asks Count Duke to give him some beer because it will go perfectly with the plate. Count Duke tells him to go get one himself, so Randolph does. As he savors the flavor of the beer and then takes a healthy bite of the meat, he feels proud of his intuition. He comments that this is the perfect dish to accompany with alcohol. He praises Count Duke enormously, saying he will never get tired, even if he eats this dish for the rest of his life. Count Duke isn't really thrilled though, because he could have gotten rid of all the bad smell if he had had more time. He turns to White Rice to ask him what he thinks. And the wolf cub wags his tail quickly to tell him that he liked it, while the puppy asks for more. Count Duke is still contemplating how the dish could have been improved. This leaves Randall speechless and now believes that Count Duke's skill level must be higher than that of the imperial chef if he is not satisfied with the delicious food he has just cooked. Later, a slightly drunk Randolph says he wanted to invite Count Duke to a meal this time, but ended up being treated by him again. Do you want to know how such an amazing cooking technique can exist in the world? Count Duke is glad he liked it, and Random says he'll never be able to eat regular hopping bird meat after this. Again he asks Count Duke if he is okay, if he copies his cooking technique, and he responds that he will be okay because he is nothing special. Randolph cuts him off in the middle of his sentence anyway. He says he knows some chefs and that's why he knows the value of Count Duke's skills. Random tells him that his dishes are brilliant, so it shouldn't be underestimated. Count Duke is happy to hear that and thanks the cavalry captain. Randolph then decides to give Count Duke back all the amazing and beautiful things he has shown him, and his idea of paying him back is to teach him fencing. Count Duke is speechless at his suggestion. And Randolph repeats it in case he didn't understand it proudly. He says that although he is now in this rural area, he was once a reputed knight in the capital and thinks his fencing lessons would be a valuable reward for Count Duke. Count Duke tries to tell him that he is just a chef, and Randolph suddenly starts laughing as he declares that countless people come to him and beg him to teach them fencing. Count Duke tells him to teach those people then, but Randolph says he doesn't like them. He tells Count Duke to be ready with a beer and a plate of meat for the next time they meet, and then he will teach him some fencing. Although Count Duke is not interested in learning, he understands that the cavalry captain might be embarrassed to receive a free meal. He increasingly realizes that Randall will feel uncomfortable if he racks up more debt now. Count Duke decides to accept his offer because he can consider fencing training as an exercise, and if he becomes stronger, thanks to that, you will also be able to use heavy utensils properly. Ready. The night sky is covered with the northern lights, and as Count Duke admires them, he has no idea of the consequences of accepting Random's offer back in town. It has been a week since Han-juk opened his restaurant in recent days. Many locals visited his restaurant, but only for a few days. Now Kan-juk is completely free and can only see the birds from his window. He knew there would be no customers, but he still feels a little depressed about it. White Rice is watching TV to cure his boredom. The TV was a gift from a customer who left it saying he no longer used it. Kan-juk, curious. He decided to see what Witter Rice was watching and discovered that it was an interview with a group of idols. Reading the name, Eunice thought it sounded familiar. At the same time, his friend, who helped him settle in the village, was busy with his work. And what was he doing? Well, he was the manager of the same group, Idol Eunice. Jim, Kan-juk's friend, asked the girls if they were comfortable working in that location. And they complained that the place was very rural, the sun too bright and the huge grasshoppers, exhausted. Jim didn't even listen to the complaints and told them they had done a good job. He preferred to work quietly in his office, but that was impossible. With a group of girls who couldn't keep quiet, he checked his schedule and saw that there was nothing else to do that day. After finishing the interview, since he had time and was close to the village of Kan-juk, he decided to visit it. Jim called Kanyuki in a mocking tone, asked him if he was still alive, told him that his filming was over and that he would stop by for some food later. Kan-juk, clearly not very enthusiastic about the idea, couldn't help it. Jim told her that he had no other guests, and that he was not going to eat anywhere else. When his friend was a chef. The girls heard this and started muttering among themselves about the chef as Sim planned his visit. The girls were devising a secret plan. Jim left them with his assistant asking them to behave, to which they responded with feigned innocence, asking when they had not been kind and obedient. Jim, knowing the answer well, decided not to argue and left them to the assistant, but he hardly left. The girls convinced the assistant to follow Jim, arguing that apologizing is easier than asking permission in the meantime. Kan-juk was mopping the floor complaining that Jim was an egocentric. I wasn't happy with the sudden visit. Although he was not busy, he was sorry that Jim showed up unannounced. He decided to cook something while White Rice continued to watch television. Suddenly the door slammed open and Jim carried his assistant in. Kan-juk, puzzled, wondered what was going on. Jim apologized. Saying that he had unwanted guests, the Eunice girls happily introduced themselves. They soon began to worship White Rice, who fled from them. Kanjo couldn't believe that his simple restaurant in a remote corner of the country would receive a visit from idols. Jim, angry, scolded the girls for their audacity and asked them if the girls thought about the consequences of their actions. With their heads bowed, they could only apologize. Jim ordered them back, but Kan-juk, understanding the situation, suggested that since they were there, they should eat something. Before leaving, Jim, surprised by Kan-juk's calm reaction, asked if he was really all right. Kan-juk asked the girls what they wanted to eat and they ordered spicy and greasy food. The assistant reminded them to watch their diet, since they were promoting their new show. Jim thought Kan-juk had lost his mind when he decided to move to the country to heal. But now he seemed changed. Kan-juk went to the kitchen and after reviewing his ingredients, decided to use some well-ripe tomatoes. He began chopping onions and frying garlic while preparing meat. In another pan, he grated cheese, determined to cook something nutritious and delicious for his guests. Soon the meal was ready, tomato paste and steak salad. The girls, excited, began to take photos, and then eat. The blonde girl, surprised by the taste of the pasta, commented that she usually doesn't eat pasta unless it's creamy, but this one was delicious. Another girl with bangs said the vegetables in the salad were very fresh and the meat very tender. Kan-juk told Jim he had prepared a light meal and asked him to let the girls enjoy themselves. Jim, Surprised by Kanjuk's consideration, he suspected if his friend was acting like this because he was dying. Kanjuk asked him coldly if he looked terminally ill. Later, the girls praised Kanjuk's food, saying it was the best they had ever tried. Kanjuk promised to cook something even better next time. The blonde, calling him by name, promised to return. Kanjuk, surprised that he never showed up, asked them how they knew him. Jim revealed that the girls watched his cooking videos when they were hungry, so it was obvious that they recognized him. The next day, Kanjuk rode his bicycle to the local supermarket with white rice in the basket. There was only one supermarket near the town, the rest were in the nearby town. On entering, he saw a dark-skinned woman working there. And he thought she was the daughter-in-law of the old lady he saw last. The woman asked him if he was looking for anything in particular, and Kanjuk thanked him, saying that he would take a look when he saw that there were no ingredients he needed. He decided to try his luck at the bigger supermarkets. As he left, he saw some children fighting, a boy and a girl pulling at each other's hair while insulting each other. The boy shouted at the girl to go to her country, leaving her speechless. Kanjuk separated the children and asked the child to recant. Just then, the woman from the supermarket came out, and seeing her daughter Million, ran towards her. Kanjuk, relieved, thought his job was done and let the boy go, who ran away. The grateful woman introduced herself as Jung from Vietnam and told Kanjuk that she believed her daughter was being harassed because she was a foreigner. Kanya wanted to console Junk Young by telling him it wasn't true, but he knew that would be lying. He had clearly witnessed, as the boy told Mi Yun, that he turned to the country he came from because he looked different from everyone else. Kanyok understood that this was a sensitive subject and could not speak lightly about it. He remained silent, so Junk Young spoke first. She commented that she knew who Hanjuk was. But all I knew was that he ran a restaurant across town. He suddenly asked if he would care to teach him how to cook, leaving Kanyuk with his eyes wide open. He asked him what he meant, and Jung Jung told him that he only knew how to make Vietnamese dishes. He revealed that this year 100,000 wanted to invite all his friends to his birthday party, so Jung Jung wanted to prepare Korean dishes for them. Jung Jung's words greatly impacted Kanjung, and even after returning home he couldn't stop thinking about them. He felt the sincerity in Jung Jung's gaze and had no choice but to accept his request. However, he felt a little depressed now because he understood the reason why Jung Jung was asking for his help. He knew he wanted to make Korean food so the other kids wouldn't make fun of his daughter. This thought frustrated Kanjung for some reason. And suddenly he saw white rice trying to catch up with him. Kanjuk thought this was a sweet moment where his puppy was comforting him, but no, white rice just wanted his food. He had found a can of premium caviar, my dear, and wanted Kanjuk to open it for him. Kanjuk, surprised, asked him where he had found it and told him that he didn't even know that directly from the tin. But the puppy kept insisting, opened the can in disappointment, saying that he always came asking for help when it came to food. This was another moment of enlightenment for Kanjuk, who realized that asking for help when needed is the right thing to do. He soon decided to ask for help too, because that's what the neighbors are for. In the middle of the afternoon he brought a package with some sauces and decided to visit one of his neighbors. Kanjuk thought he knew who to turn to in situations like this, and that was a trustworthy person who knew a lot about the other townspeople. Kanjuk reached the door and rang the bell. Soon the door opened. Hizojin, the pregnant woman, greeted him with surprise. He said it was unexpected to see him there. She was also surprised because she thought she was going to visit the village chief. Kanjuk told Shojin that he would like to know his opinion on something. And she invited him to come by. For Kanjuk's surprise, the village chief was also there, and I have to say that I am a fan of this guy's moment. The scream that Kanjuk should have gone to his house if he needed his advice. Kanjuk asked him what he was doing there, and the old man replied that he had come to drink early. Kanjuk finished telling him his dilemma. He said he'd been thinking about the touch could teach Jung for his daughter's birthday party. Sojin replied that he knew the woman from the supermarket too. He had also seen the million girl walking with the boy named Sanjo. After school a few times, Kanjuch was surprised to hear that the children went to the same school and that they were friends. Sojin's husband, Minju, explained that since there was only one school around the village, all the children went to the same school. He also added that although Sanjo and Milyon were friends, they were not the same age. There were less than 20 children in the whole school, so they only had one class Kancho, who now understood that the school had a combined class for all grades. Sojin said he could understand how young Yun felt after what had happened to Milyon, ran his hand over his belly and commented that he would do the same for his son. Kanjunk reflected deeply on his words and thought that all parents want their children to live without worries. Then he said he should teach Yongjong something he could learn quickly, but the village chief dismissed his idea. Instead, he suggested Kanjunk do the opposite. Tell Yongjong that first Vietnamese dishes. Kanjunk, surprised, said that the reason why Yongjong wanted to learn Korean food was for the sake of his daughter. But the village chief stood firm. He believed that trying to fit in by force with others might negatively affect young Milyon. The old man asked what children his age knew. I didn't think even Milyon could accept the differences between them at that moment. That's why it was the adult's duty to show him that being different wasn't a bad thing. He told Kanyuk to do his part in this as well. The village chief concluded his lesson by saying that a single bite is more meaningful than 100 words, and Kanjuk felt that he was telling the truth. Soon after, Jung-un started cooking under Kanjuk's guidance, but she was still unsure if she was doing the right thing. I thought Korean and Vietnamese dishes were too different, and worried about what would happen if the kids didn't like Vietnamese food. At that time, Kanjunk handed him a bowl of rice noodle soup that he had prepared and asked Yongjong to take the onion out of the broth once it was cooked, since children are usually picky. Yongjong agreed, and then Kanjunk gave her his opinion on the Vietnamese spring rolls she had made before. Although they were delicious and familiar, I believed they would be too hard for kids to roll up properly, resulting in fewer kids choosing to eat them. So he suggested replacing them with another dish called chagios, a type of fried dumpling can. I thought the kids would love their crunch, and if John Young told them they were Vietnamese dumplings, they'd be more interested. As John Young watched Kan Young help her, she so sincerely felt that everything would be fine as long as he will help. After that, she made another dish that had a little bit of everything from green vegetables to grain sprouts and some fried meatballs. He introduced the final course to Kanjuk and told him it was called buncha. Kanjuk already knew the dish, which was not as famous as rice noodles, but it was certainly one of Vietnam's representative foods in this dish. Meat, vegetables and noodles were eaten after being dipped in a spicy sauce. That's exactly what Kanjuk did and then took a bite. The sauce smelled sweet, sour, and refreshing, and I thought the kids would like this combination. He told Yun that this was a good main course and then asked her to bring him a glass of water. As soon as she left Khan, Jokin thoughtfully summoned his assistant White Rice, and asked him to taste the soup. As soon as White Rice tasted the soup, she started wagging her tail violently and slapping Kanjok's face with it. That was a very good reaction, and faster than Wittery. He had moved his tail from all the dishes he tried that day. Now Kanjuk believed that Jung must be a great cook to receive such a reaction from her official gourmet. I almost forgot he couldn't prove anything until he took out the dog. Soon, Jung returned with the glass of water and was surprised to see Kanjuk's face so disheveled and covered in white hair. He asked her what had happened. But he changed the subject, and started giving her advice about food. He told her to leave the pepper out of the soup because it might be too spicy for the kids, and also asked her to reduce the amount of cilantro. He also suggested to her that she will add beef to the meatballs instead of just pork as it would make them juicier at the end of the story. Kant-ju, who praises Junyoung for his delicious cuisine and assures him that the children will enjoy the food very much. Yoon, radiant with happiness, thanks him with the rice cakes in his arms. Kant-jung heads home thinking that having Yoon as an excellent cook is great luck. In addition to the fact that she understood his comments perfectly, he now feels calm, without worries. Suddenly, 1000 approaches him from behind and Kant-juk turns to find her. Staring at him, she hands him a handmade invitation for his birthday party. Kant-juk asks surprised if she herself made her proud of her work of art, 1000 won. He warns her that without that invitation she will not be able to enter the party, so she must not forget to bring it with her. Then 1000 gets sad when she mentions that there probably won't be many kids coming to her party. Kant-juk asks why. And she explains that she fought with Chuk Min, who has a lot of friends. Kant-juk recognizes that name as the rude, racist kid from before. 1000 continues to regret that no one will come to his birthday party, leaving Kant-juk not knowing what to say to him. The day of the 1000 birthday party finally arrives and she is nervous and anxious. He wonders if Chef Kant will come and hopes that at least Anhu will be present over the other guests. She's not sure, though some have promised to come. While 1000 wonders what will happen if no one shows up, her mom arrives to show her her dress. 1000 Talon is surprised to see her mom wearing traditional Vietnamese dresses and praises her saying she looks beautiful. Gunjin explains that they are clothes from his country and asks 1000 if he wants to try on some excited. 1000 accepts and has fun with her new outfit. Suddenly the doorbell rings and 1000 runs happily to receive her first guest, but is surprised to see Cholming in front of her, visibly coldly nervous. 1000 asks him what he is doing there and the nervous man tries to apologize. 1000 shows him the invitation that he clearly doesn't have. Chulmin panics despite being nervous and sad that he didn't receive an invitation. 1000 finally gives in and hands him over. Hers tells him that this time Ichulmin will forgive her. Holding back tears, she thanks him. Meanwhile, the other children who were hiding outside the gate show up and after this melodrama, they shyly ask if they can go out now. They tell Chulmin not to be bad again and he feels ashamed of having been discovered. Then the children gather in front of the door and happily display their invitation cards and birthday gifts for 1000. She is happy to see them all and soon they come in and sit at the table. Vietnamese dishes are presented and the children are amazed. They ask curiously, "What are those dishes?" Because they've never seen them before. Meanwhile, 1000 sits proud in her special seat. Kant Hain is helping 1000 mom in the kitchen and feels like all the kids in school are at the party. Do children curiously ask how those dishes are eaten? And Jung explains to them that this dish is called boncha, showing how it should be made. Two girls try the first bite of meat and noodles dipped in sauce. And they experience an explosion of flavors in their mouths. They declare it sweet, sour and salty. At the same time, Jung continues to explain about other foods while a girl with glasses is delighted with fried Vietnamese dumplings, assuring that she will marry one. When everything grows, they laugh. Upon her occurrence, a child points out that Milong is wearing a different dress and asks her what it is. She proudly stands up to show it and explains that she is from Vietnam. Like all the dishes of the day, the kids comment animatedly about how the mom of 1000 must have flown in to bring those things, and even the girl named Milo admires the dress and proclaims that she will marry it in the future, taking half the fabric if they divorce. 1000 asks her mom to show the dresses to her friends, also wanting to show off her outfits at games. Chunjin hesitates for a moment about the kitchen. But Kanja and Jian reassures her by saying that they are almost done, and that she can go happy to see 1000. So excited, mother and daughter show their dresses to everyone, while the children admire them. Kanja and Jian watch from a corner with a smile, glad to see them happy. Meanwhile, in the fantasy world there is a small settlement of tents. In one of the camps, A cat woman with a skull adorning her head is asking about her naughty daughter, who has run away again. In front of her is a gray-haired catman who informs her that they increased the number of guards, but the girl managed to escape through a hole in the net. The red cat woman asks if she went to see the human again, and the gray catman nods. Intrigued, the red cat woman wants to know who that human is who has captured the interest of her daughter and the sacred wolf as well. He orders the gray catman to invite him, which leaves him surprised and alert. He asks her if she really plans to let a human into his settlement, but she assures him that as leader of the town, no one will dare to discuss his decision. She removes her mask and says that as the mother of her daughter, she should at least meet the human she is related to in the forests of the fantasy world. A majestic servant who looks like a rare legendary Pokemon is standing by a river. Alert by the roars and growls he hears in the distance. Those sounds come from Rice Cake, whose barks are so loud that even Kantjan covers his ears to protect himself. He orders his pet wolf to shut up in frustration that he is so upset over simple dead shrimp. Kantjan thinks that maybe it's because Rice Cake has never seen them before, since there are no bodies of salt water nearby. He considers it a pity that the wolf cub reacts like that. Since the shrimp are really delicious, although he admits that they can seem disgusting to someone who has never seen them before. But then can't. John thinks for a moment and remembers that every time Rice Cake brings him prey after hunting, it is much more disgusting than shrimp. Now he is confused and wondering what exactly Rice Cake standards are. Well, since he can't do much about it, he decides to show the wolf the true taste of shrimp. He places them in a bowl of water and begins by removing their whiskers and internal organs. Then spread coarse salt in a pan and place the shrimp neatly. On top of that he puts the pan on the stove and covers it, and that's the recipe. Kanjon comments that he wanted to show this to Randolph too, but they still have enough shrimp left for next time, so maybe he can show it to him later while he waits for the girl to be cooked. Feral Cat also gets there. Kantyon is confused to see her again, but she is totally focused on the pan. When Kantyon asks him when they joined, the cat girl looks at him surprised. Rice Cake hasn't noticed it yet, as he's completely focused on the pan. Kantyon decides not to pay too much attention to useless details and thinks that if the cat girl is here, she can also eat something since she always seems to be hungry eventually. Kantyon unlid the pan and find that the shrimp are browned to perfection. He separates them with gloves because they are so hot and then places them on plates for Rice Cake and the cat girl to eat. They both watch them in confusion, and Kantyon tells them to try, take a bite, and are suddenly overwhelmed by the taste of the shrimp. They feel like they are surfing the ocean on a giant shrimp, and they melt while eating it. Kant Leon asks them what they think the taste of the sea and sees them devouring the shrimp. He is proud and pleased that they are liking it so much. The cat girl finishes her food and looks at Kant Lion eagerly asking for more. He's about to peel more shrimp for her. When the gray cat man suddenly arrives looking for the girl he calls Mona, she is startled to hear his voice and instantly hides behind Kant Leon. The gray cat man explains that he escaped from town again, and Kanyan does not recognize him as the same man who took the cat girl. Last time he tells her that the girl looks hungry, so he should let her eat. Before taking her back to town, he tries to assure the cat man that he's not giving her anything weird to eat, but then the man suddenly speaks, telling Kanyan that he's here today for him and not for the girl. Kanyan gets nervous and a little scared now. And he asks, "What do you want from him?" The cat man approaches him and looks at him coldly while asking the human to follow him. Kanga Gen was too nervous to obey the man. Gray Cat, his voice trembling, asked him where they were supposed to go. The catman replied that the village chief had invited him. Turns out the boss was Mona's mother, and considering how violent and wild the girl was, Kanga and Jen could only imagine what his mother would be like. He wondered if the boss planned to question him about what she had been feeding her daughter Kanga, and Jen decided he shouldn't follow the gray cat blindly. He made up an excuse, saying that he was quite busy that day and that it would be difficult to go. At that moment, the cat man understood his problem and suddenly handed him a small horn. He told her that the warriors in his village used it, and that he could use it to call them. When I had time. Kangayan took the horn and thought that since the cat man was being more considerate than he imagined, maybe it was just an ordinary invitation. He asked him why the boss wanted to see him, and the gray cat responded that he wanted to meet the human who had managed to get his daughter out of town. Those words definitely had a threatening air to Kangayan. And he felt that it would be a meeting with a father. Angry, the cat man left and Kangayan was left trembling since he hadn't even called the cat girl. Oh, by the way. Suddenly, Kangai stopped him for something. A few minutes later, the cat man returned to his village and entered his tent privately to review what Kangayan had given him. It was a bunch of cooked shrimp in a plastic bag. Ellen had told him she couldn't let him go back empty-handed after he'd come this far. That's why he gave her the shrimp, saying they might look ugly, but they were quite tasty. Well, Catman tried one and his tail started wiggling, which meant he liked them. Ellen, on the other hand, was still sighing as she wondered whether she should go to the Catman village or not. In the background, White Rice and Mona were fighting because White Rice was stealing her share of Kanga shrimp. Jen thought that since White Rice didn't react to the gray cat man, he didn't seem like a bad person. He was also curious about the village, though he was unsure. Meanwhile, White Rice had gotten over her head and was eating a bunch of shrimp in one go while Mona tried to snatch them away from her. Kangajan was so absorbed in his thoughts that he did not notice them and wished there was someone with whom he could consult on the matter. No sooner had he uttered those words than Knight Captain Randolph suddenly appeared. Randolph was surprised to see two beasts fighting as they climbed over Kanga and Jen, who didn't even flinch. She looked like an average mom of a toddler. He didn't care that Mona and White Rice's claws were dangerously close to his eye. And he told Randolph that he had arrived at the perfect time because he needed his help with something Kanga. And Jean told the whole story to Randolph, who said it was incredible that he'd been invited to a village of men. Beast Kanga and Jean asked him if he was so weird. While Mona and Witter Rice rested beside him. Randolph explained that the beastmen and humans had long since cut contact with each other. It was also the first time I had seen a human receive an invitation from a beastman. In addition, Kangayan was receiving an invitation from the cat tribe that followed the principle of community breeding. He was surprised that such a tribe would leave a child in Kangayan's care, which was an incredible situation. But as always, Kangaye wasn't aware of that. Random finally told Kanga and Jen that he could go to the village of men, Beast without worries, and assured him that they would not harm him. Kanga and Jen were relieved to hear that. He said he would accept the men's invitation. Beast next time and stood up shaking his pants. Random looked at him in surprise, and then Kanga and Jen took out some shrimp, asking them if he craved something delicious with that. Kangai Gen made a special little shrimp recipe with a little extra seasoning. Just one bite was enough for Random to feel the vastness of the ocean. He thought that Kangai Gen's skills never let him down and that she always brought new flavors to the table. The dish only contained garlic and lime, in addition to the shrimp, but that combination worked very well. Randall thought that despite being salty and oily, the dish was really delicious, and it felt like giant cute shrimp winking at him. And more importantly, he was fascinated by the addictive texture of the meat, and thought he could eat an entire bowl of that. Witter Rice was living the life Randolph could only dream of, eating Mona's food after cleaning his plate, and Kangayan was trying to stop him without success. Randall thought peeling shrimp was a pain and just popped a whole shrimp in his mouth. This guy probably ate his oranges and pomegranates unpeeled. Kanga and Jen were also surprised to see Randolph eat a whole shrimp, but it seemed that White Risa and Mona were also following their example. It looked like they got tired of waiting for Kanga and Jen to peel the shrimp for them. And that was good for him. Not only that, they seemed to enjoy the taste and texture of the shell as well, and Randall proclaimed it a delight in itself. Kanga and Jen still warned them that the peel could be sharp in some places, and then they continued eating. After a while, all the utensils were empty and all the bellies were full. While Kanga and whoever was collecting things, Randolph told him that to thank him for the excellent food he should give everything to teach him. Kanga and Jen was confused, and asked him what he was talking about, and Randolph told him that he was obviously talking about fencing. Kanga and who suddenly remembered that they had made such a deal in the past. Randolph told him not to worry too much because it was his first day, so they would start with basic training. Well, one man's basic training is another man's nightmare. And when the afternoon came, Kanga and whoever was lying face down on the cold grass was exhausted, and Randolph commented that he had terrible stamina and that at that rate, becoming the strongest warrior would be a long journey for him. Kangagen could only say that he was just a random chef asked him how he could be so exhausted from a simple 4-hour walk at his age and that his body must be really weak. Suddenly, the worried Witter Rice began to lick Kangagen's feet and he began to feel better in that part. Kanga and Jen wondered if he was just imagining it, or if the pain around the part White Rice was licking was diminishing. It gave him a cool and relaxing feeling, so Kanga and Jen just relaxed. Right then Mona also started licking his other leg because she was worried about him, but that didn't do anything for Kanga and Jen, and only made him feel wet and slimy. Somehow Kanga and Jen got up and tried to pet Mona while saying that he appreciated the gesture. Randall told Kanga and Jen that he was impressed by her persistence in getting up again, and presented her with a bronze practice sword. On that occasion he said it was lighter than a real sword, but not bad for practice. He said he originally made it for his daughter, and Kanga and Jen shuddered when he heard that. He told Randolph he couldn't accept something that was meant for his daughter, but the night captain told him it was fine. She said her daughter had trypophobia, which is the fear of needles, and that was definitely too big to be a needle. Randolph was a little disappointed to say that, but he cheered up because he had another student he could teach instead of his daughter. He told Kangai-kan that with his help he could become the strongest warrior there was. Kanga and Jen really didn't want that and believed that he should be preparing for constant muscle pain for a while. Still, he accepted the practice sword and Randolph's lessons. In the evening, Kanga and Jen finally returned to their house and decided to cook some pasta for himself and for White Rice. With a sigh, he commented that he had really run out that day, which made him crave a late-night snack. After a long time, first he gave his plate to White Rice, who devoured it with pleasure even though the pasta only had bacon and garlic. Kangai-gen was satisfied to see Witter Rice enjoying the food and then took a bite for himself. While chewing he suddenly froze. Witter Rice was looking at him with a question in his mind, barking to express his confusion, because Kangai-gen seemed strange to him. Suddenly, Kanga and Jen left the chopsticks on the table and ran to the cupboard, grabbing everything they could find. She placed all the items on plates in front of him in a hurry and after a while exclaimed that she could taste things again. He was on the verge of tears and couldn't believe what Kanga was saying, and Jean realized that his sense of taste hadn't fully returned yet, but at least he could taste the food again in the meantime. White Rice was completely confused about what his human was babbling. Kangai-kan thought that if he had stayed in Seoul, he would have given up cooking. Well, he had also given up on himself when he arrived in this village, but now that he had regained the most precious thing in his life, he fell to his knees under the weight of happy emotions that he could not contain in his heart. He thought that now he could cook to his heart's content again, and then gently told White Rice that he was glad he had moved to this place. On the other hand, the village chief had drunk too much at a friend's house. Stumbling and staggering, he was heading home thinking about how he would treat his friend with some alcohol next time. Just then she noticed that the lights in Kanga and Jen's restaurant were still on and she was curious to know what she was doing well. Kanga, Ellen was cooking, cutting tomatoes, frying mushrooms and then sealing a very delicious steak, while white rice was in paradise just with the smell. There were other ingredients as well, such as fresh lime and purple grapes that Kangayen used to create a sauce. After everything was ready, he finally introduced a dish that was once part of his signature menu. The dish looked really appetizing and provocative, and Kangagen decided to take a bite to see how it tasted. It turned out that while I could taste the tartness of the dish, well, I couldn't seem to taste the savory or umami. He still took his hat off, saying that this too was a start. Just then, White Rice barked from behind, telling her with bright eyes and a wagging tail that she absolutely loved the dish. Kanga and Jen were happy that at least someone could properly enjoy the taste of the food and decided to give him Agwiti Rice more dishes. She made some dishes that she had won cooking competitions with, and they spent the whole night cooking, eating and having fun. The next morning someone came knocking on Kanga and Jen's door quite loudly. Kanga and Jen arrived at the door completely disheveled. He'd spent all night cooking and his stomach wasn't feeling well either. After eating different types of dishes, he asked the visitor to be a little quieter, but the visitor was the village chief and was in a hurry. He shouted to Kangagen that he had to go with him. Immediately Kangagen was confused and asked what he meant. He told the village chief that he was very tired now, so he should come and see him later. But the old man told him they didn't have much time and started putting him in his van. Witter Rice arrived, too, still sleepy, and only watched as the old man put his hand in the van and drove away. They soon arrived at the village hospital, where the chief told Kangagen that Sohin was giving birth. At that time they ran to the hospital after parking the van, and the boss said he had also come running. Despite their hangover from the night before, they made it to the delivery room. Where many people had gathered outside the gate, the old aunts surrounded Mino and flooded him with questions. They asked him how his wife was and if the child had been born yet. Mino was already too tense and couldn't answer any of his questions. Kangayan also noticed his expressions and thought he needed some help. Just then, Grandma Park arrived there and shouted loudly at everyone, asking if this was some kind of fish market where everyone had gathered to chat. He told them that they were bothering the employees there and ordered them to leave. Everyone was terrified of her, and even the village chief told them that Grandma Park was right. He said too many people there were no good, so they should go back. Then he said happily that he would stay there as the village chief and take care of things. But Grandma Park had other plans. She grabbed her shoulder and told her she was going with her too. He tried to protest, saying he was the village chief, but the old woman just dragged him. Kanga and Jen was the only one left and thought Mino would feel more comfortable without people around him. However, Grandma Park told him to stay there. Kanga and Jen was confused, so she told him that he should stay next to Mino, since he was her friend. The village chief shouted that he was Mino's drinking buddy, but he was dragged away anyway. Kenkai-jin was stunned, sat next to the nervous Mino and thought the atmosphere was too uncomfortable. He thought it would have been better for the village chief to stay there, and, no, he had never been in this kind of situation before, so he didn't even know what to say. He tried to make something up, but then Mino thanked him for staying with him. Kangagen was surprised by his words and told him that it wasn't a big deal, since he was just sitting next to her. Mino told him that her presence was more than enough for him. He said he was very excited at the time, but also very worried. Kangagen noticed the nervous Mino and realized that he must be about his age. He patted her on the shoulder, casually telling her that everything would be all right. Well, he couldn't look directly at him because he was nervous, but his words really hit him. I felt some confidence and relief, for which she thanked him. Soon the child was born and the old men gathered outside the hospital loudly announced that it was a girl. Everyone was happy when they heard the good news because it had been a long time since a baby was born in the village. They said it was a big day, so they couldn't let it go. Without celebrating, they all said in unison that they should organize a banquet. Just then Kangai-gen came out and the boss asked him about Mino's condition. Kangai replied that he was with Soji, who was crying like there was no tomorrow. Okay. Then he realized that no one was interested in hearing more about me, not because they were busy thinking about the banquet. The village chief told him that it was very normal in that village to strengthen their ties with banquets. That reminded Kangai-jin that he had been invited to another village, specifically the village of men. Cat asked the village chief what he should bring as a gift, but the chief went into gang mode upon hearing this. Furious, he asked Kangai-gen if he had been recruited by another village. He was ready for a turf war with any village that tried to steal a young man under 40 from his village. Well, after learning that it was only an invitation. The village chief was a little disappointed because he apparently craved violence. He then told Kangai-ji that if he visited a village he should bring some alcohol or a local specialty. Kangai-ji thought bringing a local specialty was a good idea, and asked the chief if his village had a special product they produced. Well, the boss couldn't tell him anything except Korean beef, but Kangai-gen told him that that wasn't a specialty of his village, because he knew that regions were famous for their meat. In the end he thought alcohol was a good enough gift. Then he went into the fantasy world and pulled out the horn the gray cat man had given him. He felt nervous before blowing it for some reason, but then decided to. The sound of the horn echoed throughout the forest and all kinds of creatures heard it. Kanga and Jen got tired after blowing it for a while and wondered if the gray cat man would find him wearing this. His questions were answered immediately. When Catman appeared there, suddenly Lemon was on his back greeting him. The Catman asked him if he was ready and then immediately picked him up saying they must leave at once. Kanga and Jen was astonished by this strange means of transportation and shouted at the Catman to wait and bring him down first. His words were of no avail, as the Catman jumped through the trees while carrying him and Kanga, and Jen shouted loudly again. Well, he also suffered from dizziness during this small but turbulent journey and started vomiting rainbows. The Catman only commented that humans seem to have gotten weaker lately. Not knowing that Kant-yon was not a human of this world, he also pointed out that Kant-yon's lower body was especially weak. Maybe that's why he didn't have a girlfriend. Of course the Catman only talked about his legs, and Kant-yon remembered Captain Randolph saying the same thing to him. He once wondered if his legs were really that weak just then. The Catman decided that he would walk the rest of the way, which pleased both Mona and Arisqui. The gray cat said that his village was already visible in the distance, and Kanchon stood up to see it. He found a picturesque and peaceful settlement and commented that all the houses looked like Mongolian tents. The gray cat was curious about the Mongols, but Kanchon told him it was nothing, only that the village looked a lot like another place he knew. The gray cat was surprised to learn that there were human villages that looked like his own. This reminded Kant-yon of what Random had told him before. He told him that there was no danger in going to the village of the beast catmen. The first reason was that they considered the white wolf sacred, and the second reason was the treaty that existed between humans and men. Beast Kant-yon was curious about the treaty and Random was surprised he didn't know about it. He explained that in the past there was a great war between the different races. The brutal war continued for hundreds of years and because of that, the entire continent was engulfed in chaos, destruction and death, with huge piles of corpses on every battlefield. It seemed the whole world was doomed. If the war didn't stop, then one day a miracle happened. The gods could no longer bear so much death and destruction. So they decided to intervene on the battlefield to end the war. After that, a treaty was signed between the various races to prevent conflicts between them. Naturally, the different species began to distance themselves from each other. After that, while Kantjan thought about all this, while walking with the grey cat man, he wondered if the beast men would really welcome him to his village as soon as he entered the village. A curious horde approached to see a real human. Not only were there beast cat men in the village, but also other breeds such as bulls and bears. A bull beast man commented that the human seemed weaker than he expected. Another girl said that the human also had the sacred white wolf. They were curious about him, and he was really the person whom the village chief had invited. Just then other beastmen arrived and blocked his path. They seemed hostile about welcoming a human into their village, and openly questioned their leader's sanity for inviting him. Kantjum saw that the old beast man had no intention of moderating his hostility. But then, the grey cat man intervened. He told the old beast man, who was the Temu warrior chief, not to forget that the human was a guest of the village chief. The old beast man began to frown at the grey cat man, whose name was revealed as Noah. Temu asked him if he had lost his pride and reputation as a warrior by protecting a human. He didn't answer that he was just following the boss's orders, and asked the old beast man to step aside. Temu didn't take her word though. He asked Noah kindly when her status had become so high that she could give her orders. As the two warriors were about to face off, Risakake began to growl angrily. All the beastmen were terrified and hid when they saw the angry sacred white wolf. Even Kanchon was surprised to see Risakake so angry. Temu was also perplexed to see the sacred wolf growling at the cat girl. Mona also started imitating Risakake and Kanchon. Did you wonder what was wrong with him now? The beastmen were even more confused and believed that Simona and the white wolf were protecting Kanchon was definitely not an ordinary human. Kantjan found this too much to bear. He had only come because he was invited, but he did not expect to have been dragged into this drama. Now he felt like a princess in distress, with Noah, Mona, and Risakai trying to protect him from the evil Temo. This situation was too suffocating for him, and he didn't want to be the cause of a fight there. Just then someone jumped on him and answered Kant's prayers, John, that someone would stop the fight. She turned out to be the leader of the village and made a superhero entrance by placing herself between the two opposing parties. Suddenly, she told Kant Yon that she felt she would die of old age while she waited for him, and he didn't even know her. Noah told him that he should show respect to his leader Cassandra, the chief of his tribe. However, Cassandra told Kant Yon to feel free to call her by her name if she wished. Kant Yon bowed nervously to her. He introduced himself, then thanked Cassandra for inviting him. Mona ran anxiously to her mother, who held her in her arms. Then he told Kantyan he didn't need to be so nervous. He revealed that the reason he had called him today was to thank him because his daughter had been bothering him lately. Kantyan tried to be polite and said that Mona had not bothered him, but Cassandra asked him if he was sure of that. She knew her daughter's personality very well, so it was obvious that it would be a nuisance for everyone. Their awkward conversation was interrupted by the nervous Temu, who asked the boss why he was thanking a simple human. Cassandra simply turned and acted surprised Temu was there. He put on his best smile, saying he thought some idiot was trying to break the treaty by fighting a human. He said since it wasn't just any idiot, but Temu. I was sure he would never do such a thing. The old warrior chief was embarrassed to hear this, and could only nod weakly with the leader. Cassandra laughed and said that a wise man like him would never make such mistakes. Anyway, he said he had to attend to his guest now, so he should just go back and mind his business. I fear the path of anger, and his fist trembled in frustration, but he had no choice but to agree with the leader. Soon Kant-yong found himself in Cassandra's tent, with other prominent beastmen there. She commented that he must have had an unpleasant encounter earlier, just as he entered the village. However, he asked her not to worry. Therefore, he stated that the people of this village were not used to seeing humans, and it was not that they despised him personally. That was uncomfortable enough for Kantyon, since he could feel the curious looks of the beastmen upon him. He felt like he would be torn to pieces just by looking at him. Cassandra then said that although it was really unusual for them to invite a human to their village, she really wanted to meet the protagonist of the rumors. Kanyon was curious about the rumors and Risakake gave him a disappointed look. Cassandra asked him if he hadn't heard the rumors yet because the entire forest was talking about the human who managed to tame a sacred white wolf. He said that many beings had been watching him in the forest, and asked if he had ever felt their eyes. Well, the only thing Kantyon felt when he heard this was shame, because he had just found out that he was an unwitting Twitch streamer all this time. His camping trip gave the impression that he was a complete rookie and that was being broadcast live to some people. However, Cassandra said that wasn't important at the time. He told Kantyon to name anything he wanted in exchange for taking care of his daughter. Cassandra claimed that her tribe always pays favors and debts. Kantyon, nervous, told him that there was no need to go that far, because all he did was share some food with the girl. Then he mentioned that he didn't want to come in empty-handed today, so he brought something good. Cassandra could smell it already, and asked if the delicious thing she smelled was in her bag. Kant Script pulled out a lunchbox containing some boiled pork he had prepared as a side dish. He said it wasn't much and that the amount wouldn't be enough for everyone there, but Cassandra almost jumped on him saying that he had brought something too precious as a gift, and that he was being too modest about it. However, she clearly heard Kant Script call him an accompaniment, and asked him if that meant what she thought he meant. He said nervously, saying that he had also brought an alcoholic beverage that he did not believe existed in this world. Well, Cassandra took the bottle of Korean rice wine with pleasure, and then enthusiastically asked Kantyon if so, how did he domesticate his daughter? He seemed to have tamed the mother beast too. Kantyon could not give a coherent answer to that question. He then told Cassandra that it would be better not to drink the wine at that time because he was so agitated during his trip that he might explode because of it. Hearing the word explode, the beastmen became alert and furious. They tried to attack Kantyon thinking he had given something dangerous to his boss. They didn't even give him a chance to explain himself, and declared that he had finally shown his true intentions. Kantyon managed to say that when he said explode he meant that the pressure inside the wine had increased and that it could bubble violently when it was opened. Okay. Cassandra seemed curious about it, so she violently shook the bottle and then removed the cork, causing the gas to come out flying everywhere. She was intrigued when she saw him and asked Kantyon if that was what he meant by explosion. However, he was soon disappointed when the gas dissipated, and Kantyon somehow saved himself from being hit by the Cassandra beastmen. Then he drank the wine directly, and the beastmen were astonished at his recklessness. They were frightened, and asked him how he could drink an unknown substance. They wanted to know if it was okay because the drink seemed really weird. Well, the only weird thing he did was make Cassandra belch loudly. She was pleased with the drink and exclaimed that humans were very talented. He asked how they made that wine because it was slightly sweet and acidic, and the flavor was very deep. Its velvety texture made him want to drink more and more. He also began to crave the accompaniment and pointed to Kanjon's backpack, which was full of strips of boiled pork. He tried a piece of that meat and commented that it didn't smell bad and that its texture was smooth. She didn't even need to chew it long before she swallowed it. Cassandra couldn't believe that soft, moist thing was meat. She emptied the whole box and said she was so absorbed in the taste that she wouldn't have noticed if someone was dying right next to her. He declared that they would have to share this delicious meal with everyone, but there was something else he needed to do before that. He suddenly apologized to Kanjon, scaring his subordinates, who asked him how he could apologize to a human. Cassandra said that her tribe had been acting rude in front of her guests, so it was appropriate for her to apologize. The two beastmen also realized their mistake upon hearing this and apologized to Scriptkant for overreacting earlier. He told them he was fine, But if things were left to Noah, that would change. He planned to stab the two rude people with his spear if they didn't stop, and even says he was furious. Noah said there was no way a human chosen by the sacred wolf could bring something dangerous here.
Cassandra declared that everything was in the past now, as they had apologized and thanked Kanjon. It was time to celebrate. He shouted loudly so that all the members of his tribe knew that they were going to organize a festival. He immediately declared that they must unleash their abilities to the fullest, since this festival was for his precious guests. He announced that the hunter who managed to catch the most delicious animal would receive the title of Chedu. Kantyon could only cover his ears to protect them from the loud noise, but the beastmen were super excited. They joined their leader as she declared that they would show their guests that they had the best parties. Well, this wasn't good news for Kant. Yon was already tired and wondered why villagers everywhere liked to celebrate so much shortly after all the hunters left the town. After Cassandra announced that the hunter who managed to catch the most delicious animal would receive the title of Chedu, Kongwon was left alone with Cassandra and the children. Cassandra explained that the term Chedu referred to the best hunter in the tribe, and that the person with that title had the honor of leading the hunt. Now Kangen understood why everyone was so excited about the hunt. Ahead of them, the Beast Boys scampered carefree. Cassandra suddenly asked Kangen if he liked getting married, because then he could also participate in the competition. With the calm of someone with experience. Kangen replied that he was not fit for the house. If he left now, he would be the one who would end up married. A girl approached Cassandra, who commented that if she were not the leader of the tribe, she would also have gone into the forest, but she must stay and take care of the children. Kangen offered to help her with the children. But before she could finish the sentence, Cassandra was tossing the girl playfully into the air. Kangayan was speechless. As more beast children approached Cassandra to have their turn to be launched, Kangayan realized that he was not made for wildlife and chose to stay there. Cassandra told him it would be better because there was another problem with him. Suddenly, a girl bit his leg. Kangayan screamed, but Cassandra laughed. He explained that he smelled very delicious, so children could instinctively bite him. As Kangen tried to get rid of the girl, he heard a loud noise, looked forward, and saw a monstrous tiger dead and wounded. In front of them, someone was panicking because the tiger was a powerful monster from the western forest. The warrior chief Temu had captured him, and Cassandra applauded him, calling him an expert hunter, Temu. He condescendingly suggested that Kangayan had probably never seen a monster, so his pride might have been hurt. Kangayan, instead of fighting, said that the tiger was fascinating and cute, which hurt Temu's pride. Cassandra and Temu asked him if he really thought the tiger was cute, and Kangayan, nervously, he explained that he thought it was cute, because it had soft fur and 4 legs. At that moment, Risake appeared with his prey, a giant purple snake. Temus was frightened at the sight of it, for it was a magical beast that spat paralyzing poison. Risakake glared at Temu's grip, which angered him even more. Meanwhile, Mona came back with a little raccoon. He hoped his mom and Kangen would be proud, but when he saw the tiger and the snake he dropped the raccoon and began to cry. Noah also returned with her prey, and although Risakake was just a puppy, she wasn't sure it wouldn't be easy to rule him out of the competition. Soon everyone returned with their prey, and Cassandra prepared to announce the result. As Mona chased her raccoon, Cassandra declared that the warrior who received Ched's rank today was Haman, a seemingly ordinary girl who had hunted a bird. No one could believe it, not even Haman, who didn't expect to be anywhere near the top. Temu was puzzled. He asked how he could give the title to someone who only hunted a bird. Cassandra explained that she never asked them to hunt the strongest animal, but the most delicious. Temo and Noah were stunned, and Cassandra said that a hunter was not incredible. Just because he was good at hunting, he should be able to select his prey according to the required purpose. No one objected, and not
although reluctantly, admitted that he was right. Cassandra shouted that since the Cheeto had been decided, it was time to light the fire and start the party. Everyone started cheering for the Chedu, and James didn't know how to react. Kangayan was happy with the result because if Rizkiki had won he would have received even more contemptuous looks. He thought about enjoying the party quietly until it was time to go home. However, there was no tranquility or enjoyment for him, the bad smell of roast meat ruining the party. Cassandra, chewing a huge piece of meat, she asked him if he wasn't excited, and he replied that he couldn't hear her because of the bad smell in the whole town. The meat was roasted over the fire and smelled horrible. Kangan wondered how they could be so happy roasting meat, despite the terrible smell, especially beastmen with sharp noses. Cassandra told him that the meat always tasted bad, except for the one he had brought, which disappeared in seconds because it was so delicious. Cassandra shoved a piece of meat into Kangan's mouth, telling him to eat before it got cold, and he finally burst. He declared that he would cook everything, but Cassandra told him that as a guest, he should stay and enjoy. Without a second thought, Kangan set to work. He asked Dice to find some edible sour fruits, and the wolf cub immediately set off on his mission. Kangan took out his toolbox and a small portable stove, leaving everyone surprised. Well, maybe I should have asked if they had any bigger utensils in town, because with that little thing I couldn't make even a portion for a beast. Anyway, Kangan began to cook, sealing the meat over high heat until the surface became crispy. Then he put it in a pot and poured some alcohol into it afterwards. He aggressively plucked some berries from a branch Riseke had brought him and added them to the pot. He waited 30 minutes while the meat cooked in the alcohol, while Angan concentrated on his work. Everyone else crept up to see the result. He lifted the lid of the pot and revealed a perfectly cooked piece of meat. He showed everyone that even the color of the meat was different now. Then, he cut the meat into slices and noticed that it didn't smell so bad. He analyzed the ingredients and commented that the fruit was a little strong and the meat was not like regular pork. He couldn't control the heat and cooking time well because of it, and planned to try again. But Cassandra had already taken a piece of meat and tasted it. He couldn't believe it was the meat his people had married because he tasted like the meat Kangan had brought. She said it didn't taste like fish and was incredibly tender. He asked Kangan if he was still not satisfied with the results, and he stated that he was a chef and his job was to make things as delicious as possible. He told everyone to get ready because he was going to take care of the kitchen from now on. Cassandra laughed at this. He couldn't decide whether Kangan was bold or shy, but he liked him very much. However, he told her to feed the whole tribe. It would be a lot of work and he couldn't let his guests do that. He called the skilled beastmen in the kitchen and asked them if they had seen all the nervous Kangain. He said that since the meat was different, it wouldn't be easy, but the beastmen were already at work. They examined the different types of meat, the acidic fruits available, and even their alcohol. Cassandra told Kangan to let them take care of everything, because it was their responsibility to cook the prey they hunted. Anyway, he thanked Kanga for showing them so generosity, so in the end he didn't let him cook Kanga in yet. He helped a little by giving advice and suggestions to the beast chefs. Everyone had fun, and the party ended in the afternoon. He did not serve as a guide for Kangan on the way back. And Cassandra went to say goodbye to him with her daughter on her shoulders. He told Kangan he wanted to give him a proper farewell, but everyone was hungover. After the party, he handed him a small whistle, and told him it was a proof of his friendship with the beastmen. Cassandra asked him to call them whenever he needed him, because he was now a friend of her tribe. Kangan was happy, and thanked him while thinking about this experience that he would never forget for many reasons. He thought that he could not experience such a thing in his daily life, and that he would not witness anything so spectacular when he returned home. Well, never say never. When he returned home he found an old man in disguise in front of his restaurant, asking if there were any tables available. She was surprised to see him, and thought that his daily life was not so ordinary after all. Kangen coldly welcomes the old man to his restaurant, and asks him what he wants. Meanwhile, they think you haven't installed a necessary item in your store yet. Anyway, the old man tells him they'll start with cold water, the coldest he has, because he's sweating a lot from all the heavy leather he's wearing on this warm sunny day. Looking at it again, Kangen thinks again of that necessary element, that turns out to be a security alarm. He wonders how much it would cost, because now it seems like a good investment. The old man doesn't seem to notice her suspicions and hesitations and keeps saying that he had only heard about the place, but he didn't expect to find a restaurant here. He wants to order immediately, and judging by his way of talking, Kangen thinks he is not from the village. The man says he wants bongole, and he wants it to be with fettuccine. Those words leave Kangen stunned, and immediately changes his attitude towards the suspicious customer. He apologizes and says they don't have fettuccine right now. The old man says it's okay because he was just asking in case. However, Kangen tells him that instead of fettuccine, they have linguine, and the old man's eyes open in surprise. Kangen asks him if he will be satisfied with linguine and nods. Well, you may wonder what these fancy names are. They're actually different types of pasta. Kangen never thought someone would come to this remote place and ask for fettuccine. In particular, fettuccine is a thick, flat pasta, and linguine is a little less thick than fettuccine, but thicker than regular pasta. Since the old man liked thick pasta, Kangen offered him linguine, which was the best he had after fettuccine. He thinks most people in this place don't even know the names of the different pasta shapes. But the customer had a very specific request while cooking. Kangen thinks maybe the old man really likes Western food. Grill some clams along with garlic and oil and then pour some wine over them. It has been a long time since she was asked to do something elegant, and she plans to use this opportunity to show off all her skills. Soon, he completes the bongole paste and presents it to the customer. The customer is impressed by the appearance of the dish and takes the first bite gradually. He finds the clam flavor to be strong, but not fishy at all. It also has just the right amount of spices that bring out the flavorfulness. Are you sure this isn't the skill of an ordinary restaurant owner? He looks at Kangen and thinks he didn't expect such a high-level pasta in a rural town. He sees great skill in Kangen and thinks he can do something special he needs to do. The old man gets up and asks Kangen if he can talk to him for 1 second and turns around. The TV is on and it talks loudly about a famous painter named Jun Hain, who has once again made his mark on the art world with his latest painting. The famous painter is giving a speech about the last art festival he attended and the opportunities he got after that. Just when the customer hears this, he quickly hides his face and Kangen gets confused. Nervously she asks him if there is any problem with the food, and the man tells her not to worry. Later he finishes his meal and tells Kangen that it was very delicious. He says he never thought he could eat real Italian food, so far out in the country. Kangen responds that it is the same for him, because the old man was the first person to ask for a specific form of pasta. She asks him if he likes Italian food, and the man replies that he used to eat it a lot when he was studying abroad. Kangen understands the reasons now and thanks the client, because thanks to him he was able to show his skills. After a long time, he tells the man he can cook anything Italian and asks him to visit the restaurant again. Upon hearing this, the customer asks if he can make minestrone. Kangen knows it's a traditional Italian soup with pasta and vegetables. It is an easy dish to make and is typically eaten shared with the whole family. Kangen is sure that his client knows Italian food well, and asks him excitedly if he wants it. Now he is eager to show off his skill and says he can have it ready in 30 minutes if he wants it to go. The man tells him that he will come again tomorrow and asks Kangen to do so then. Kangen is a little disappointed to have to wait, but says he will prepare in advance.
The client thanks him and adds that he is not the type of person who makes such requests, but that seeing Kangen's great skill he could not help it. He takes off his glasses and introduces himself as Junghain, placing special emphasis on his name. Kangain is confused, but introduces himself in response. Haeun is surprised that Kangain didn't recognize him. Even after it has been shown on TV, a moment ago he asks Kangan if he doesn't watch TV and he replies that not much. The old painter is a little confused and decides to leave to return tomorrow. Kangan is still confused as to why the client suddenly showed up. When his attention turns to television, he sees that the show is talking about the famous painter Yong Hyun, and a documentary about his life is also being produced. Kangan is stunned to hear this and lets out a cry of surprise, which frightens poor Risekake. The next day, Kangan apologizes to Hain for not recognizing him yesterday and stutters that he is a fan of his works. Hen would rather believe the words of a politician than this and asks Kanganzi if he would believe the same. Instead, Kangwan admits he wouldn't, and then the old man tells him not to worry about it. He says he came to the country because he doesn't like being treated like someone special. He says he's become quite arrogant. Kangain also tries to tell him that that wasn't what he meant, but Jane looks out the window and gets lost in thoughts of his past. He says maybe he wanted to remember the old days when he was still passionate and humble about Kangin cuisine. Soon Kangin prepares the minestrone soup that Jane had ordered once again. Haeum finds the soup very delicious, but the expression on his face is quite neutral. Kanga complains that she's eating, like she doesn't care about the Haeum flavor. He's not much surprised to see Kangan staring at him from across the table. He assures Kangan that the soup is really delicious and that he has never tasted it so good in Korea before. It's so good it could be sold in authentic restaurants in Italy. However, it is different from the flavor that Jaeun is looking for. He says he ate minestrone a lot during his time studying abroad. Kangan asks him to explain himself and Jaeun says that dozens of years have passed since then. He went to Italy only with a dream of becoming a good painter and had no money at all. He did all sorts of jobs to stay afloat and still buying a bottle of paint was too hard. Back then, all I could eat was some pasta and a pinch of salt. Hyen says he was having a hard time, but his pride was too strong to allow him to ask for leftover vegetables at the market. However, every time I managed to sell a painting, I ate at a restaurant. It wasn't haute cuisine, but it was still something that gave him a sense of the ogre in those days. A plate of minestrone full of vegetables was the most precious thing to him. Hyen says that at the end of his fighting days he got a good chance and left Italy and has since avoided Italian food. However, after a while he realized something. He realized that the painful memories of the difficult past are still his to relive them properly. I wanted to have that cheap minestrone soup. Once again, Haeun begins to talk about how things always seem better and sweeter in memories. And he begins to get up. He says the soup he ate in Italy couldn't have tasted much different. Kangain asks him if he doesn't think he can find the same flavor if he looks for it. Hyen responds that he doesn't think he can find him and then thanks him for the food and for listening to his ramblings. However, Kangain is not willing to give up. Haeum's story of surviving in a completely foreign country only resonates deeply with him and he wonders what he could compare minestrone soup to on his own journey. Suddenly, Kangain asks Haeum to describe the flavor of the soup in detail. Haeum tells him that the soup was not as delicious as the one he made and that the broth was thicker. They used cheap veggies, so the flavor was average, but still refreshing as well. It had a slight Haeum fish flavor. He then asks Kangan if he knows about the town called Malfi, a coastal town in Italy. He says maybe it was because it was a fishing town, that even the vegetables tasted like fish. Kangan remains deeply thoughtful and asks Hyun if he can dedicate some time to him tomorrow so he can try his minestrone soup once more. Later,
Kangain begins to prepare a minestrone and make it exactly as Haeyun wanted it. And as always, Risekake is there to help him. Kangan thinks aloud that the ingredients for soup vary from place to place and from family to family. He remembers that Hayen told him that the soup had a thick broth, a fishy flavor and had no meat. That worries him because the soup tasted like fish even though it only contained vegetables. Research online for possible causes. Suddenly he has an idea. Kanga wonders if an Italian fish stew called caciuco was used as the base of the soup. That also leads him to wonder if the refreshing taste of the minestrone that Jaeyoon ate came from a combination of seafood stew and tomatoes. However, Haeum was knowledgeable enough, so Kangain believes he would have known if he had eaten caciuco. Kangain begins to wonder if the painter was remembering a different flavor due to a faulty memory. He then starts looking for the city called Malfi, which Haeum mentioned, and what he finds blows him away. Kangain looks at the photos of Amalfi and thinks it's a beautiful coastal town. The sailor sees something and then starts saying that Haeum might have an even sharper memory than his own. As he looks at the images, Kangen notices that Amalfi is not only famous for its seafood, but also for its lemons. These lemons have a unique flavor and are often used in local cuisine. Then you have an idea: what if the slight fishy flavor that Jen remembered in the soup did not come from shellfish, but from the lemons that grew near the sea and absorbed its essence? Determined to recreate that minestrone soup exactly as Jaeon remembered it, Kangain decides to try Amalfi lemons in his recipe. The mixture of these lemons, along with the vegetables and broth, could be the key to recreating the unique flavor that Jaeon remembers the next day. John visits Kan Yeon again and Kant Yeon comes out to greet him saying he was waiting for him. He asks him to sit down while he makes his soup, but Gaeon seems to be in a bad mood today as he holds his smartphone so Kan Yeon won't see on the phone. There are featured videos of Kan Yeon winning a cooking competition that have over 100,000 views, and Gaeon stammers angrily as he says Kan Yeon told him he didn't watch TV. How is it possible that he appears on a program? Kant Yeon tells him that his look is scary and then Gaeon finally takes a seat. He comments that he now understands how Kant Yeon can be so talented. Kant Yeon just politely laughs saying he doesn't even watch his own videos. He then moves on to the main topic and asks his guest if he isn't curious about his minestrone and Gaeon says yes. He tells Kant Yeon that he really appreciates him for taking the time and effort to listen to an old man's ramblings and indulge him. He says that's enough for him and Kant Yeon realizes that the old painter doesn't expect much. He knows Gaeon is right to keep his expectations low because he has visited countless restaurants before in search of the familiar flavor, but has not found it anywhere. However, Kant Yeon is confident that his dish will make him see things differently. He presents his special version of minestrone a Jaeon, who is surprised by its smell. The dish smells too fishy and the broth is also somewhat foamy. He wonders if this was the same dish made by the same chef who made a perfect minestrone yesterday. He even wonders if Kan Yeon made it nasty on purpose as he takes a spoonful of the soup just as he tastes the minestrone. Suddenly his days in Italy and how young and passionate he was come to mind. After fully enjoying the images brought on by the taste of fish-flavored minestrone, Gaeon gets sentimental and says it's too much. He says that if he had tried this dish for the first time today he would have thrown it away immediately, because it's not really pleasant. However, being able to experience this familiar flavor once again is truly a treat. Kant Yeon then tells him that since he mentioned a fishy flavor, he focused on the idea that minestrone might have been based on caciuco. But even those don't have that strong fishy flavor. Kant Yeon says he later thought about the viscosity of the broth and its connection to the fishy flavor. That's when he got the idea that clams were mixed into the minestrone broth. Because of the clams, the broth became thicker, and also had a strong fishy flavor. Jeon is surprised to hear about clams and begins to think about them. He thinks there was no way the cook who made the minestrone didn't know about the extra strong fish flavor, so maybe he did it on purpose to torment other people, especially him. Kan Gelon responds that there are many ways to ruin the flavor of a dish, but he doesn't think anyone would make that much effort to ruin it. Then he says that perhaps the woman added clams to the soup because she was concerned about the health of a young man who worked so hard in a city so far from home. He says that perhaps the woman knew Gaeon's condition very well, so she added mixed clams to the soup so that he would receive proper nutrition, but also so that his pride would not be affected by this act of kindness. Jeon's eyes open when he hears Kanye Jeon's theory, and he remembers the woman in the store who often looked at him strangely when he gave him soup. He admits that if he had known this at the time, he would never have visited the restaurant again. It was his pride that got him through the hard times, so he wouldn't have liked to lose it. He gets excited and starts laughing, saying that the woman was too interested in other people's affairs. Later, when Gaeon goes out, he tells Kant Yeon that he has a villa nearby, so he will visit him from time to time. Kant Yeon tells him he's welcome anytime. Jaeon then suddenly looks at the walls of the restaurant and comments that they look empty, and Kan Yeon is confused about what he means. Gaeon tells him it's nothing, and then when he gets into his car with the help of his driver, he asks Kan Yeon to keep his visit a secret since he is incognito. With that he leaves, and Kan Yeon says that nothing screams more suspicious than having a personal chauffeur in a fancy car. Just then another person approaches him from behind and asks him who the suspicious person was who was leaving. When Kant Yeon turns around, he is surprised to see his friend Jim. Jim only greets him and asks him how he has been, and Kant Yeon, frightened, asks him what he is doing here. He replies that he is on vacation, but is too lazy to travel abroad. He was looking for a place with clean air and delicious food, so he ended up coming here. Kant Yeon's pissed that Jim's here to take advantage of him and make him cook for him. Anyway, Jim tells him that he won't stay long, so Kant Yeon shouldn't worry about him. He's only here for 3 days, so Kant Yeon only has to make him 9 meals. Kant Yeon is angry and says he won't cook for him, but Jim won't listen to him. Go in and look at Kant Yeon's house, saying that he remodeled it very well. The grumpy Kan Yeon tells him not to settle too much because he will definitely make him pay for his work. Just then Jim looks at Risacake and asks what breed he is, because he has never seen a dog like that dog. Yeon says he doesn't know, but that Risakake is cute, and that's enough. He tells Jim to go ahead and pet him and decides to do so. However, just as his hand is about to touch Risacake, her ultra instincts kicked in and she quickly moved away from Jim. Kant Yeon laughed in the distance, saying that even the seasoned boar hunters in the village couldn't catch Risakake, but that it allowed her to caress him calmly. He laughs malevolently and tells his friend to pet his dog. If you can. Jim realizes that Kant Yeon only wanted to brag that his dog is very selective with the human touch. She asks him if he really gets along with the villagers with such a nasty attitude. You want to know if Kant Yeon is an outcast here and this offends him? Kant Yeon shouts that it's not that weird as he bangs the glass of water on the table. He says the villagers even threw him a party. Jim just gives him a pitiful look because he thinks Kant Yeon must really be alone to make such a fuss. His reaction makes Kant Yeon even more frustrated. And Jim doesn't look twice as pitifully. Just then someone knocks at the door and Kan Yeon tells Jim to relax while attending to your client. Mino's idea comes up, who, seeing Kan Yeon leaving his apartment, asks him if he was on rest. Kan Yeon says the restaurant is open and asks if he is there to eat something. Mino denies it and says he only came to give him something. Kant Yeon finds a pair of oven mitts with Risacake silhouettes baked into them. He is surprised to see them, and Mino says his wife made them herself. As a thank you for the delicious seaweed puri Kant Yeon made for him. Kant Yeon is surprised to hear that Sojin made these gloves herself and says that she is really talented. Kant Yeon then confirms with Mino if the figure in the middle of the gloves is Risacake, and upon hearing his name, Risacake comes out wagging his tail. Mino says that Sogen actually wanted to thank her personally, but she's still recovering after giving birth, so coming all the way here is too much for her. Soon after, more people arrived at the store, including the village chief Mahyeon and another boy. Watching Kan Yeon happily interacting with them through the window, Jim is quite impressed. Finally, he thinks Kan Yeon wasn't lying when he said he was doing well in the village. The truth is that Jim came here to keep him company in case he got lonely, but now that he doesn't have to, he decides to just relax and enjoy the free meals for the rest of his stay. As Jim starts up the stairs, he thinks in terms of grown-up and matured. Kant Yeon, however, will soon learn that he is wrong about two things. First, there is no such thing as a free lunch, and second, Kant Yeon is still a little immature at this point. Kant Yeon has an idea, and enthusiastically turns to the village chief with ulterior motives. Shining on his face, he asks the village chief if he didn't say he needed extra help. He tells him he came to the right place because he can help him. Kant Yeon tells the village chief to have two assistants on his side, and without knowing what he has gotten him into, his friend Jim is quietly watching TV upstairs. It was a radiant day in the village, one that makes you feel like anything is possible, even if you're sweating like crazy in the sun. There was Jim, Kang Yeon's poor friend, standing in the middle of a rice field with a handful of seedlings in his hand and his face soaked with sweat, while everyone around him worked non-stop. Jim stood there cursing Kang Yeon under his breath. According to him, his friend was fried, but Kang Yeon, he walked as fresh as a lettuce, helping a grandmother harvest potatoes, as if hard work were his thing. After digging up the potatoes in record time, Grandma, amazed, asked him if he wasn't tired. "Are you stronger than you look?" he commented, leaving Kant Yeon thoughtful. Was all that training with Randolph paying off? As he pondered, Grandma interrupted him, suggesting that he take a break and join his friend, but when she mentioned Jim Khan, Yeon simply ignored her, asking what else could he do. Jim, on the other hand, seemed to be up to something dark, muttering that he would have to find the perfect place for his own funeral. While Kan Yeon continued to work a while later, both friends sat down to eat Jim with an air of resignation. He commented that he should have seen this coming since Kant Yeon prepared that giant breakfast that morning, but Kant Yeon paid no attention to his complaints and told him to continue visiting his restaurant without warning so that he could put him to work for free. Jim, trying to maintain his dignity, replied that he had not raised him to put him to work on his vacation, to which Kant Yeon replied without blinking, "You did not raise me, remember?" To make up for dragging him here, Kant Yeon offered to make Jim whatever he wanted for dinner. Looking at a group of happy old people eating, Jim had an idea. "I want to eat." Hambalaya said a plate of rice, meat, vegetables and a broth full of flavor. Kant Yeon was surprised. "Do you really want to eat that American street food? I expected you to order something more expensive and complicated," he said, but Jim was determined. "I craved jambalaya, and that was it." Already in the kitchen, as evening fell, Kan Yeon set to work. He started by frying the shrimp shells, which left him a little confused. "Why fry something no one eats to make a good broth?" Kan Yeon explained. "It would be a waste not to take advantage of them." Then he added water to the broth and while it boiled, he went to work on the other ingredients. To his sausages and combined them with butter by adding chicken. Then, when everything was cooked, he added the rice, pre-cut veggies, some sauce and of course, the shrimp broth, some seasoning, cooked shrimp and covered the pot for 1 minute. Voila! The Creole-style jambalaya was ready. Jim, curious, asked if jambalaya was suitable for dogs. Because rice cake, his dog, was devouring it with enthusiasm. Kant Yeon smiled and told him that he had prepared it with the dog in mind. Also, Jim, impressed, thought that was great.
Then Kant Yeon asked him if he had always liked jambalaya, since he did not remember mentioning it before. Jim, with a nostalgic smile, reminded him that jambalaya was the first dish Kant Yeon made for him when he first visited his house. That time, although they didn't have many ingredients, Kant Yeon did it without hesitation, and the result left him speechless. As Sin took a bite of the jambalaya, he remembered how the rice had a hint of umami, the seafood and vegetables were perfectly seasoned, and the combination of sweet, spicy and salty was unbeatable. "That day I knew you would succeed," Jim said, which left Kant Yeon completely surprised. Jim assured him that he was not talking for the sake of talking and that he was convinced that his sense of taste would soon return. The emotional moment was interrupted when Kant Yeon, with a slight smile, asked him if he had already mentioned that his sense of taste had returned. Jim, looking incredulous, could not believe that his friend had forgotten something so important. Although he was not yet fully recovered, Kant Yeon explained that the improvement had been recent. Jim was a little disappointed. But, happy with the good news, he asked if that meant he planned to return to Seoul. Kang Yeon, glancing out of the corner of his eye at Risakake, who was watching him with curiosity, admitted that he wasn't sure yet. At first he was afraid to return, but now he was beginning to like his life in the village. Jim, always the sympathetic friend, told him there was no hurry, especially since his sense of taste hadn't quite returned. And then, with a touch of humor, he put a can of beer in front of Kant Yeon, suggesting that they celebrate his success in rural life. The two clashed their cans and Kant Yeon thanked him for the kind words, though he didn't know how to respond. Thus, they immersed themselves in a long talk, letting time pass without haste. A few days later, Kant Yeon headed to the other world to train with Randolph, armed with wooden swords. He tried to face the veteran knight, but Randolph's heavy blow disarmed him in the blink of an eye. Still, Randolph was impressed, as Kant Yeon had held out 1 second longer than last time. "Your stamina is improving faster than I expected," he told her, praising her progress. According to Randolph, with those skills, Kant Yeon could last about 5 seconds against the younger knight in a serious fight. Looking at his bruised hands, Kant Yeon wondered if he was still weak enough to fall in 5 seconds. It had already been a month since they began training and Kant Yeon was still learning defense techniques. But realistically, going up against someone as strong as Randolph was a no-brainer. Determined to continue, he took his sword again and Randolph warned him that in the next round he would use a little more force. Just as Kant Yeon was beginning to feel terror, Randolph felt a nearby presence in a blink. He didn't show up with Mona in tow. Impressed by Randolph's perception, Noah approached as Mona ran happily towards Kant Yeon. Meanwhile, Rizakake, ever protective, lunged at Mona before she could reach her owner, Noah, watching the scene. He commented that it was rare to find a warrior as skilled as Randall in these parts, and he couldn't help noticing his fierce gaze. Randolph, with a smile, asked Kant Yeon if he would not be interested in joining his training. Confused, Kant Yeon suggested that he ask it himself, completely ignoring the fight between Mona and Risakake that was unfolding over his shoulders. But Randolph explained that they couldn't communicate because neither had a translation device. Kant Yeon, surprised, couldn't believe what he heard as he said, Cake kept bullying Mona without him noticing. Kant Yeon had never stopped to think about that before a real translation device. But Randolph, without losing his rhythm, told him that beastmen don't usually appear without a specific reason, since the training session was about to end. He decided to call it over, but not before telling Kant Yeon that next time he would hope that his endurance would improve even more. With that, Randall headed for his house, leaving him with Noah. Kant Yeon, still a little confused, turned to Noah and asked her who brought him here. Noah, in her carefree tone, replied that Mona had wanted to come and he simply followed her. But of course, there was something else. He didn't appear to have a strange curiosity about the fact that Kant Yeon was learning fencing from Randall, so to clarify things, Kant Yeon explained to him how he had come to that situation. He shared some food with the Kapitani. Before he knew it, he was taking sword lessons. It was then that he finally felt the epic battle between Raiseke Kimona over his shoulders, and decided to end the fight, throwing them to the ground as if nothing had happened. Brushing the dust off his shoulders, he told Noah that he should be grateful for learning those valuable skills from Randolph. Noah suddenly became serious, something that didn't happen often. "I also received food from you once," he said, causing Kan Yeon to raise an eyebrow before he could reply that it wasn't a big deal, right? He added that he had also given meat to his village, which added up to twice that he had given him food. Now he did not agree that it was his duty to return the favor. Kant Yeon, with his instinct on fire, felt that something bad was coming, but he was not willing to take no for an answer with determination. He told him that he would teach him the martial arts of men. Beast Kant Yeon's stomach turned. He knew his intuition was right. But he tried to get out of trouble by mentioning that he was more than satisfied with Randall's fencing training. But Noah, feeling offended, interpreted that as a racist comment. "Do you think the martial arts of beast men are inferior to human fencing?" he asked seriously. And there, in a desperate attempt not to be cancelled by the entire race of beastmen, Kan Yeon accepted the offer and asked, when would Noah begin? Now, happily, he announced that they could begin immediately. "The martial arts of the beastmen are the strongest in the world," Noah proclaimed. Ready to teach him the basics, Kant Yeon, without much enthusiasm, thought that after surviving the hell that was training with Randolph, this couldn't be much worse. But what I didn't know is that hell has different levels, and I was about to find out. One knew Noah with a smile of complicity. He ordered her to get on all fours. Kant Yeon gave him a look of disbelief, but not continually. Beastmen's martial arts start with the basics, running on all fours. Before he could process it, Noah told him to run to the top of the mountain in that position and be serious. As he looked towards the mountain, Kant Yeon sighed deeply, knowing that he was about to experience a new level of torture the next day. Kant Yeon decided to make a trip to Seoul with 1,000 V Sang-woo to visit his mother, who was hospitalized. Before leaving, he left Rikei in the care of the village chief, but the little rascal did not stand still and decided to follow his owner to the big city. The kids were so excited to visit Seoul, while Jim, the driver, was worried about how he would handle Kant Yeon in the crowd to help him go unnoticed. Jim lent her a cap and then they all headed to an amusement park. With the help of the children, Kant Yeon managed to overcome his fear of crowded places and public trial. Against all odds, she had fun in the park while saying, Kate was living her own adventures by following her owner. After a day full of fun, Kant Yeon took Sanju to the hospital to meet his mom. After an emotional reunion, everyone returned to the village. Arriving at Kant's house, Yeon found Risekake, who looked shattered and seemed to have learned the lesson of never returning to the city. The next day, Kant Yeon decided to go camping in the other world and started cooking for Risekake and Mona using species from his world to give a different touch to their food. Without realizing it, he was being watched by an elf scout, who, although not interested in the meat, was tempted by the delicious aroma. Suddenly, Kay rose, who appeared behind the elf, scaring her so much that she fell from the tree in which she was hiding. Kant Yeon, hearing the loud noise, went to investigate and found a beautiful elf with her face red with shame. Falling from a tree is probably the worst thing that can happen to an elf, and to top it off, she was the best scout in her tribe. To his horror, he had fallen in front of a human. Kan Yeon, completely confused, he only managed to ask him if he was okay and if he needed help getting up. The elf, embarrassed, shouted Shane's name, and suddenly a majestic blue bird flew toward them, almost colliding with Kan Yeon. In the process, the bird landed on the elf's shoulder.
Whoever told Kan Yeon that she had shown him a very pathetic side of herself that day warned him that it would be better if she didn't say a single word about what happened. To which Kan Yeon was completely lost. The elf only nodded in a cold tone, warned her that if she told what happened, she would face the wrath of the elves, and thus she disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving Kan Yeon even more confused. After calming down, Kan Yeon remembered that he had learned about another humanoid species, besides humans, and the press bestia just then laughed. KK poked his head out of the tree, and Kan Yeon, sure that he had caused the elf's fall, asked if it had been his fault. Rice Keek, with an innocent look, tried to look like the most sinless being in the world, but Kan Yeon didn't believe it even for a second. He felt sorry for the elf who had been so embarrassed and decided he must apologize to her. It was then that he realized the elf had forgotten her dagger. Kan Yeon picked it up, deciding to keep it just in case, when suddenly he heard the kitten's cries. Mona had not arrived to take it away. Back in the village and greeted Kan Yeon calmly, without paying attention to Mona's tantrums. Kan Yeon, curious, asked Noah what he had done wrong this time, and he responded that Mona had left without permission again. The village leader had sent Noah to find her, and the news left Mona speechless. Noah explained that her mother, the leader, would not give her special treatment just because she was her daughter, and that she would take her to her room for proper discipline. Kan Yeon felt sorry for Mona, who was already trembling with fear at the thought of her mother's punishment. Suddenly he didn't catch a strange smell and asked Kan Yeon why he smelled like a nervous elf. Kan Yeon explained that the smell came from the dagger he had found. She told Noah about the elf she'd met after Dice Keek knocked her down, but omitted the key detail, remembering how angry the elf was. Noah, almost deducing that the elf had fallen from the tree, quickly dismissed the idea, thinking that it was impossible for an elf to fall from a tree unless she was a complete idiot. Kan Yeon was a little worried when he heard this. And when Noah asked him if anything special had happened between him and the elf, he quickly denied that anything had happened to change the subject. Kan Yeon asked Noah if he was hungry and offered him some food he had prepared earlier, but the plate was clean thanks to Mona. Noah said he was fine, that he wasn't hungry, but Kan Yeon wasn't going to let him go on an empty stomach. He asked her to wait while she prepared something quickly. He had brought ingredients for some meat skewers in case the beastman didn't like spices. He put the meat and some vegetables on the grill he had brought, and soon the skewers were ready. Kan Yeon gave an anus while keeping Rice Wat Kimona at bay and told her to hurry up before the two children ate everything. There was no bite to the skewer, and the taste was so delicious that his ears pricked up in attention. But despite that, he only commented that it wasn't bad. Kan Yeon told him he would pack up the rest so he could enjoy them after he left Mona with her mother. Mona was worried when she heard that, but she didn't accept Kan Yeon's idea. On the other hand, the scout elf was in a corner of the forest full of beautiful flowers. She was still ashamed of falling from the tree in front of a human and a sacred wolf. I thought as long as they didn't say anything, all would be well, since they didn't seem to be very talkative. Just then he felt someone approaching, and it turned out to be Noah. The elf commented that she didn't even try to hide her presence, and Noah told her that she knew she was watching the human. He asked the elf what he wanted, and she replied that he was only investigating the source of the commotion. Noah reminded him that shocks were natural in the forest, especially since it was a meeting point between three different races. The elf responded that they could not allow conflicts in that neutral region, to which she did not tell that Kan Yeon was a friend of the beastmen, so she should stop bothering him. The elf was surprised to hear that because of Noah's presence, she could tell that he was one of the best warriors in her village, and she wondered why someone like him would protect a simple human. But beyond that, I was intrigued by the meat skewer that Noah was holding. She wondered what that object was that he was holding, as if it were something precious, and why it smelled so good. The elf told Noah that as long as the human did not act suspiciously, she would not bother him, but in her mind she decided to continue watching him for a while more. Meanwhile, in the real world, Kan Yeon's friend Jim was taking a break from his job when one of the idols he drives, So Yeon, came running up to him. Jim asked her if she didn't have a photo shoot at that time, and the blonde girl replied that they were on a short break and that she wanted something from the car. Jim decided to unlock the car for her, but then got a notification that ruined his mood. "I'm Yeon." Curious, she asked if it was a message from credit card companies or insurance salesmen. But Jim told her it was from Kan. Yeon explained to Soyeon that he had driven Kan Yeon and sent him money for fuel. Jim commented that that was just part of her personality, leaving the blonde a little confused, Soyeon playing with the car keys. "He can't help but make an observation, you know? The more I know Kan Yeon, the more I realize that he is totally different from the rumors circulating about him," he says, frowning. "I don't believe in rumors because as a celebrity I know how things work, but recently all the gossip about him was pretty negative. People on the internet and in the news said that she was not as talented as she was shown in the media, and that she had only achieved fame because of her pretty face. They even insulted his kitchen and painted him as a rude person." Jim nods resignedly. "Yeah, those rumors spread fast. Kan Yeon has made many enemies, mainly because he doesn't know how to flatter people, but his biggest mistake was to have angered an idiot with an inferiority complex." Just then, a car pulls up next to them. And who gets off it, but the same idiot they were talking about. The guy, with his bossy attitude, starts bragging about how busy he's been since the TV station didn't call Jim Wheel. Eyes, clearly irritated by the man's chatter. Then he turns to his Yeon and asks, "Do you remember the offer you were made to appear as a guest on a cooking show? Well, be very careful with that guy who just got out of the car." It's me who is surprised, especially because the man in front of them is none other than Chef Kim Jong-sik, who is quite famous in the medium. Jim, without wasting time, explains to him that most of the bad rumors about Kan Yeon have come from Kim's mouth. "I can't believe what I hear, since I had always thought that Kim Kan Yeon were close companions." Meanwhile, Kim Jong-sik enters the recording studio clearly upset. She sees a post on social media where Kan Yeon appears enjoying a day at a theme park with two children who the media portrays as her nephews. Kim cannot contain her displeasure to see that after all the criticism Kan has received, Yeon seems to be living her life without worries. One of the station employees, seeing him frown, approaches him and asks him why Kim bothers him in his use of the whiny tone. He shows him the photo of Kan Yeon and comments with a mixture of envy and bitterness that he does not understand how Kan Yeon is not reflecting after everything the employee has gone through. Although he knows Kan Yeon has done nothing to warrant self-criticism, he decides to keep quiet. He knows full well that Kim was the one who helped him get his job at the station and thinks that siding with Kim will be better for his career. So seizing the opportunity, he starts criticizing Kan Yeon, saying that he no longer works and is just wasting his time. The employee then makes an intriguing comment asking Kim if the rumor that Kan Yeon lost his sense of taste is true and that was the real reason he quit his job as a chef and not a wrist injury. As he had told the media, when Kim heard this, he turned gloomy with a crooked smile. Asked the clerk where he heard that. The man replies that a friend of his, who used to work with Kan Yeon, told him that gossip. At that point the director of the show arrives to call them to the set, but before he leaves, Who asks his footman about the 1000th episode of the show, where they will invite several chefs. The employee, curious, asks him, "What do you want to know about that?" with a sinister smile. Who replies that he is looking forward to it arriving, making it clear that he has plans to destroy Kan Yeon's career and reputation once and for all.